The Pan-African Daily TV with Dr. Susan Tata. The Africa we want. Unity, consciousness, our culture, our spirituality, our history. One Africa for Africans worldwide. Motherland's calling its diaspora home. Join my voice. Join my team. Join my campaign. Campaign 21 hashtag 1 million subscribers on the Pan-African Daily TV YouTube. Be a volunteer. Apply now. Be the new Africa. Hey, Hotep family, welcome. Today is a power show. Today is a power show on the Pan-African Daily TV. I don't know why Naisha and Patrick Kassirim had to do this to us on the panel and in the studio. I mean, we are forced to do what we call overtime today. What am I saying? We're gonna be sitting here in the studio and hosting this last day of the African Liberation Week for close to 4 or 5 hours. I mean, so we're doing overtime today. But it's very essential and necessary because you see who is sitting here. Can you just imagine now if we have to divide according to the pi ratio family that is sitting here, and we take the 4 hours and you count the number of guests and we divide. I know he's going to tell us the formula, how much time we have and who has what time, because you see them alone, they're already chopping half of the hour, so it's a whole combination of time. Now imagine the Empress told me, you know, Susan, I still had to do my hair scarf because she's so organic, as you see all of them sitting there, and I did not even finish with her listening. Now I heard the father of the pi ratio said, I just going to get a curve and I just had a shave. Can you not hold on? And now before I finished, Junior was already like, where are we? What are we doing here? And the princess. I mean, so today is an extraordinary session on the Pan-African Daily TV. I mean, just look like we'll be hosting now not just families, we're going to be hosting villages, compounds. I mean, that's what the pi ratio is teaching us today. It is not a one-man show, Africa. It is a family thing to build Africa, to provide solutions, to look at the challenges. It is not the father doing it. It is not the mother doing it because we never had that culture. It is not, you know, the children, each one doing his own thing. It is a family thing. I mean, when I looked at this, I was like, oh, Susan, what a shame. So it's like I would have been sitting here hosting together. But of course, I'm doing the same thing. Iya is sitting right there at the technical control, assisted by Tumi. You know, that we have Naisha in the boardroom control, and we have Patrick Kassirim. So it's a whole family thing. I'm just loving this organic structure of the new Africa, where we engage our children in everything that we do. We hold these conversations with them, and tomorrow it's not going to be like this patriarchy system or a matriarchy system. It's a family thing. Africa is all about family. We are not without one another. Every decisions we make, every financial plan or future or whatever, we're involving our children from day one. So they hold us accountable. We hold them accountable for responsible for not being in that game. How much more do we need a pi ratio family and a mathematics solution for Africa? You see, so imagine they all have to come here on the show and like, all right, the pi formula means this. No, I can see them. Now you can already see the formula. I mean, nothing has been so innovative on the Pan African Daily TV like this. My family. I don't know about you out there. This my family sitting right here in the studio from the UK's, and they just want to give us everything that we need to know. It's not just a formula, it's a family thing. So I want to thank all of you that are connecting and joining. I already see you because you were waiting for this family. You already know them. I don't know how people just become famous. The pi ratio family is one of the biggest thing happening on the continent and in the diaspora. They've been hosted by all top major platforms and they're still going. But they're so quiet in the background, doing their seminars, their teaching, reaching out to people, and just doing it in a low-key way. Wow, we have a lot to learn, Africa. We're so proud. We're thankful to have this golden family, which is the golden new role for the new Africa, and particularly ending this Liberation Week with such a combination of everything that it entails with them. I cannot be more than grateful. So what is going to happen here? They're going to be telling us why they're even here and why does Africa need mathematics or science as a way forward and a solution. And why should we start even from our babies in the belly? It means the 9 months. Empress is going to tell us how, whether he had to calculate. I don't know when he was sleeping, he put those calculations, to transmit it onto the baby, unborn babies, or how. Yes, but they have the formula, how we start these things, even in our minds when the children are in the belly, and it transmits into the umbilical cord. And so we just born technicians, scientists, mathematicians, name it all. How can we be poor? No. In the next half of the show, we're going to have Professor thank you, Professor James Small. Yes. Of course, because I was just reading the tweet from Professor Pierre Olumumba on the Namibia genocide and compensation from Germany. That's also one thing that we're going to be hampering on next week on the Namibia Rwanda question week. Yes, so Professor James Moore is going to come to give us a detailed timeline for our liberation. Where did it start before we start talking about liberation? What happened to us? And why are we still here talking about liberation today? So he's going to treat from the Berlin 1884 to every step. We still think that we're still not free and there's still a lot to do. So it is a power show. Please, ladies and gentlemen, make sure you're well seated and like you can see our humble family sitting there. Yes. So time to time, we will have to give them the space to teach us, to direct us, and to tell us what we need to know. But I'll be right here in the studio, in the chat with you, reading and learning, because I also want to learn. I used to be the worst in mathematics and formulas. And today I'm just starting again from fresh. Good. So I think we are all set to go. I'll just go back live in the studio and welcome my beautiful family out there, Ratio Pi family or Pi Ratio family. Empress, what is this all about? Welcome to the show, all of you.
Thank you, Dr. Tata, for inviting us on your beautiful, beautiful platform. And we're here to let the family know, the entire global African family know the importance of mathematics from conception. That's why we're here.
I only had That's what I also had. Is somebody already thinking that? Thank you so much. Yes, over to you, my king. What is it that you would be teaching us today, or your family is going to be teaching the entire global African family? What is it that we have to learn?
Hotep family, my name's Pi Ratio. Thank you so much for having us on this amazing platform. If it wasn't for my Empress, who is known in the family as the Hunter, I would not be on this platform, because I've always known maths, but until I had her guidance and direction, it wasn't happening. It just was not happening. So all props go to the Empress, my Empress Maxine, and then we have my beautiful princess Kumaya, my daughter. We have my son Miles, and we have Onyeke is the baby.
Oh,
How did this all start? Well, it all started. It's been a long journey for not only the family, but for me in person. My time with my wife, we were forced apart for a period of time, for 4 years. And during those 4 years, I was responsible for keeping 2 families going. My wife was in Jamaica with our son, Miles. She was pregnant with Miles, and I was here with my daughter, Kumaya. She had gone back to get her visa. They said it was going to take 3 months, and it took 4 years. And in that time, 4 years, I had to find myself, because if I didn't, the family wouldn't be here today. And because of the help and support from my queen, we were able to implement certain formulas that allowed us to stay together, to keep the family strong. And so we are all under one roof, breaking bread together. Because without the family, we have nothing. So why are we here today? The reason why we are here today is because we want to share with you the importance of mathematics. But before I dive into the belly of what I want to say, Kumaya, do you have something that you want to share with the audience?
Okay, Hotep, my name is Kumaya. I would love to thank Dr. Tata for allowing us to be on this show. And I have come up with something to read to everyone listening. So, mathematics is a universal language that enables understanding of the world. It's an integral part of the curriculum beyond the study of numbers, shapes, and patterns. It also provides important tools for work in fields such as engineering, physics, architecture, medicine, and business. It nurtures the development of logical and methodical mindset, as well, helping to inculcate focus and the ability to solve all manner of problems. Mathematics is an integral part of every school curriculum. It is a foundation of many disciplines and a source of interest and enjoyment in itself. It also unlocks the door to further study and employment in a variety range of fields.
Cool. Fantastic. And Miles, you have something that you want to share as well, don't you? Go ahead.
Hotep, my name is Miles. I'd just like to say thank you for having me and my family on this show.
oh,
Go ahead.
To many children and young people, maths is mysterious and difficult, and this has implications not just for their future attainment, but also for their self-esteem. A positive attitude towards mathematics is the outcome of success in the subject.
Hey. We just wanted to kind of share that with any of the youngsters who are viewing today, because we know the importance of maths for our children. Why does the African continent need maths? Why does it need maths? Well, it's not rocket science. It really is not rocket science. Now, according to science, Africa is the birthplace of humanity. And when we search the annals of ancient times, we discover that the foundation of most of all the systems begin in Africa. Now, mathematics explains the maps, the relationships of things in this reality. I get animated from time to time. So if you see my hand moving from side to side, I'm not losing my mind. I'm just getting into the vibe. Okay. Mathematics explains the maps and the relationships of things in the reality, from the tiniest of atoms to the stars above. Okay. Identification of the functions within nature help us to learn, because we are part of nature. It helps us to adapt and to modify the functions and the functioning of our everyday life. All that we do is controlled and based strongly on functions we have observed and recorded during thousands and thousands of years. Many may say, well, what has that got to do with me? Well, from the calculation of shops, we all go to the shops. So from the calculation of shops to the stock market, to the rate of exchange, the thrust of pressure needed by when you're launching a rocket. So from one extreme to the next. Mathematics is the relationship between words, stories, figures, and figure of speech. Now, even the calculation of a fine, for example, when you go to court and you pay a fine and a court case proceedings, maths. And I'm using that because I have had to go to the court on a couple of occasions because of parking tickets that I get, that you get here in the UK. If you park somewhere and you stay over your time, you get a ticket. And then if you're challenging the ticket, you have to go to court. If you understand mathematics, there's a possibility you can get out of that fine if you look at that. But many of us, we don't understand mathematics. So the question is, and I don't want to dwell on the outskirts, is why does Africa, the continent, need mathematics? Well, numbers are the purest expression of truth because they determine the exact relationship between cause and effect. With numbers, one can easily define the time, movement, and force, which separates an immediate effect from its cause. And I want you all to know that that Africa doesn't need mathematics. Africa and the continent need to understand mathematics. We are the originators of mathematics. So mathematics is already there. We are all walking mathematicians. But the problem is the system has dumbed us down. Each one of our children are being dumbed down. You find when they go to primary school, they seem to be excelling. But as soon as they go to secondary school, all of a sudden, they're a problem. Something's not correct. So we need to understand that we are from mathematics. We are mathematics. And mathematics that they're using in the system today has just been rewrapped in a wrapping that our children don't understand. And so when they see it, they walk past it. For example, if you have many children, around the globe, they like Nike trainers. My children seem to like it. They like Nike trainers. So when you go into the Nike store, you're looking for the latest Nike trainers. Can you imagine going into a Nike store and the latest Nike trainers are wrapped in it has a different logo on it, and it's wrapped in a bag or a box, which has got your local supermarket logo on it. The children will probably walk past it because they don't recognize it. Well, that is what has happened to mathematics. They have shrouded it in a wrapping that our children don't understand. And because they don't understand, our children feel mathematics is not for them. But for the development of Africa to be, we need to create our own technology so we as a continent become so totally self-reliant. And to do that it requires mathematics. All of the things that we as a people need to do. We need to remove ourselves from this system. We need to create our own economy. We need to create our own educational system. We need to create our own health system that works for us. But the only way that's going to happen is by using mathematics. You know, by the only way Africa can get developed, you know, is by using mathematics, and that will also address socioeconomic problems. You know, we have the ability to create our own educational system, but the majority of us, we don't trust one another. We don't trust our own. And it's not our problem. It's not our problem. It's not our fault. You know, we have to say it as it is. I'm a mathematician who studies maths. I look at logics, and maths is about order, balance, structure. Okay? Now, when we look at the change of education, when we look at this mammoth journey that we have to travel across, we as elders, we're not going to see it in our lifetime. So we have to invest that knowledge in our students, in our children, in our young people, right? As I say, we have the ability to create our own education system, but we don't trust one another. And it comes from our leaders. Our leaders' traits are things such as nepotism, greediness, corruption, and all of these traits trickle down. So if you have somebody in power, let's say, who has some sort of dominion over others, it goes to their head, because that is the teachings they're getting from above, their bosses. All right. And then it causes this problem whereby, you know, it's all about, you know, whose hand can be greased and all of this kind of stuff, you know. And so our children grow up in this system and feel, well, what's the point in having to work hard and make an effort if all I can do is know this person here and know that person there? Well, that is because of the system we are in, right? But let me tell you something. The African continent and we as a people are on a rise. Hence the platform like this one and many others, right? What we call Babylon is on the fall, right? And they cannot stop the march that we are on. All we need is to become collective. Now, what I want to do is I want to share, and the family is share mathematics and the importance of it with our children. But to do that, we need the help of the parents. Because without the parents, this is not going to happen. What do I mean by that? And it's very, very simple. I remember when I was growing up and my parents, I had to go to Sunday school. For whatever reason, I had to go to church, Sunday school, and I grew up going to Sunday school, not knowing why, but it was something that I just did. Well, our children, if we are teaching them from maths from early and they have to do maths, when they get over, they will be part of it. Once they get older, they will be part of maths. They will recognize it. It will be the norm. They won't even know why they're doing it. But as they get over, they will realize why they're doing it. And they will be part of the change and not watching the change go by or watching the change around them. Now, we all talk about, you know, you have to bear in mind, and if I'm warbling on, please tell me to shut up. But no. Many of our leaders who are educated under the colonial system, and that has many of our countries in strangleholds, are the same individuals we are looking to inspire our youth. It's not going to work because they've had the teachings from the colonial masters, and then they're just passing on that teaching to our children. And so they're using a formula. It's like a logarithm. It's just manifesting and going out of control. And so many of our children are being educated in a way that's not benefiting us as a people. It's benefiting their system, because their system requires our children to help their industry. And many of our children are on a conveyor belt. That's what they've got us as. Our children are on a conveyor belt. And so they've got you and they teach you in a certain way. So you speak and learn in a certain way. So when you come off the conveyor belt, all you are good to do is go and work in their industry and serve their purpose. Well, that can't go on no more. Things have to change. You know, we talk about the late, great President Magufuli and his untimely death. And we talk about how we need more leaders like him. This is what we say. I hear this all the time. But if we as a people, as a continent, cannot protect Magufuli, then how can we protect the next 10 Magafulis that are coming behind him? Look how strong our continent is if we come together. If we come together, they just don't understand the maths. If we came together, that is going to eliminate many of our problems. You know, if we were functioning off of our natural energy, we would all be financially secure. Every one of us, we would all be financially secure, right? Where people don't let you know, the maths makes you understand. For example, in the UK economy, 3% of the money is real. Only 3%. 37% is credit. And 58% is the reserves. So only 3% of what the money is real. The rest of it is not even real.
This is debt.
It's debt. And they're educating our children to create debt because they see our children as a pawn in a game of chess. That's how they see our children, because they're teaching our children to build up credit, because it's only when credit that's when money flows, when there's credit, because they're allowed to make money, and then they make money off of the credit that our children are borrowing. It's not good enough. You know, it's important that we encourage our children to understand mathematics. And that's what I'm doing. My children, that's what we do with our children. We homeschool our children. And we know everybody cannot do this. We understand that. You understand? But when you have a problem, you cannot just say, I can't do it. Because mathematics will tell you every problem has an answer. And that's why I study maths. Because with maths, you can resolve a problem. Don't care what it is, whether it's in your relationship, whether it's in your family, whether it is to do with your life expectations, whether it's to do with your bills, whatever it is, mathematics and algebra will solve your problem. You know, mathematics also teaches you about critical thinking. It allows you to debate rationally at a level that is required to make a difference. And we are at a pivotal point in history. The universe is aligning with us as Africans to do something groundbreaking and truly transformative, right? We can all as a people create restoration. We can restore Africa. All we have to do is start with our family. Start Start with our family. Don't make this a big deal. If you see a flight of stairs on a high tower building, you say to yourself, I will never climb them stairs. Don't look at the top. Look at the steps immediately in front of you. This is mathematics. And deal with that step first. Before you know it, you have climbed dizzy heights. And that's what mathematics allows you to do. Now, we as Africans, as I said, we need to create our own formulas. Because if we have our own system, we can create our own formulas. And we will no longer be obligated to the colonial masters, who even though have physically released the chains, they're still tugging at them behind the scenes. Right? And these are the things that bleeds my heart. Now, I'm committed to the development and inclusion of our Black children with regards to mathematics. I teach children every day. I've had to devise a new system because there's not enough hours in the day and there's not enough days in the week. Children who they say, the system says, no, we can't teach these children. We you know, our children, you have to understand, when you're dealing with a genius, you cannot deal with how you deal with a normal child. Our children are geniuses. And so a genius, number one, needs to know that whoever's teaching them loves them. It's a fact. You have to be able to show to that child that you love that child and you care. Now, a Black lecturer is in the perfect position to show that love to a Black child.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely.
I've had when I used to work in the industry and I used to lecture some of these big universities. When I was in the staff room, I used to hear some of these white lecturers saying to their cronies, they've got 4 Black students in their dorm and they don't know what they're doing there. And these Black students have worked hard to get to that position and cross hurdles that many of their counterparts didn't have to cross. So we're not aware of the logarithms that are running behind many of what we are trying to do, the system, which is all mathematics, right? And all of these technical systems that they're building are all built off the 4 basic disciplines of mathematics: adding, subtraction, multiplication, and division. It's as simple as that. I'll say it again: adding, subtraction, multiplication, and division are the 4 basic pillars of mathematical understanding that has its tentacles in all areas of mathematics. Whether you're dealing with calculus, whether you're dealing with trigonometry, whether you are dealing with geometry, bid maths, probabilities, you name it. They all require addition, multiplication, adding, and subtraction. Our children need to know, and the parents and the elders and everybody, we need to know that mathematics has no boundaries. Mathematics doesn't know race. We created this. Pythagoras came up with his theorem long after we built the pyramids. Anybody who knows their salt will know that the pyramids, even though it's a triangle, is 4-sided. Work that one out. Pythagoras didn't have that in his theorem. And this is my point. It knows no boundaries, okay? So we as a people, right, we need to wake up, right? We have a tool that we created. This was created by the Black woman. The African Black woman created mathematics. us as kings, originally we didn't really have too much use for numbers and counting. But the woman, she needed to understand numbers prior to her king. We must also bear in mind, as Africans, yes, our children, when they go to school, they are taught pure maths. Now, to keep it simple, pure maths in the real world is nonsense, because it's numbers. You're working with a formula that you can't apply to anything. This is why our children don't take it too seriously, because pure maths is really nonsense. But what we need to understand is, out of the two types of maths, we have pure and we have applied. Applied maths comes from pure maths, because in applied maths is when you apply your mathematics to a system. Well, there are systems that are created and it goes into the pure maths realms and looks for nonsense formulas that it can tweak and apply to its systems. That is the reason why we learn nonsense maths. But the way that we teach it, we try to understand what our children's passion is. And we apply maths to their passion. So if you want to be a carpenter, we will teach you the maths around carpentry, geometry, angles, trigonometry. If you want to be in a different profession or whatever it is, there's maths for this. They don't have to teach you the whole spectrum of maths. This is why we lose, we get bored and we lose interest.
And they things that's not necessary.
You want to say that?
No, because you're learning things that is not necessary. Yeah.
And when you're dealing with geniuses, they don't have time for that.
Their mind is way advanced.
Their mind is way advanced. And they interpret their genius as a sign of weakness. Because if your child goes into class and is able to answer all the questions, the first thing they're going to say is, Kwame, how did you do that? Not well done, and I expected that from you. How did you do that? Straight away, you're sowing seeds of doubt. And that is what is done in all of the schools around, wherever, in Europe, in the United States, the schools in the African continent, the resources are not as fluid as the resources, say per se here as in Europe or in America. But what is being taught in the African continent, in many areas that I've looked in, is the remnants of what is being taught here in the UK. A lot of the books and so forth come from the UK or Europe, or whichever colony owns that country. It's their books. So again, it goes back to simply having our children, molding our children for their industry. And what we want to do, we want to mold our children for entrepreneurship, to create, not to go and work for the slave master, the new design slave master. That does serve no purpose. We need our children to be coming out of the educational system to build a system that is going to benefit them, their children, and their grandchildren. That is the aim of mathematics. That was why we originally had it in place, because it helped us deal with issues that we had at the time. Others came along and shrouded it, stole it, took it, wrapped it up, and now they're teaching us we see signs that we don't understand because they're in Greek or Latin or Rome, Italian. You know, I mean, it's a bit like speaking Spanish to somebody who's English. It just doesn't make sense. And we sometimes, as adults and parents, we give our children a hard time because they don't understand mathematics. It's not their fault. Whoever's teaching them, it's their fault. It's their fault. You know, I have children who are in a 7th, 8th grade. 8th grade is 7th, 8th grade is when they go to secondary school. That age group is, help me out. That is great from 11, 12, 13 going upwards. And these children don't know their times tables. These children don't know how to do fractions. These children don't know how to do long division. And many of them, when I speak to them, they're embarrassed. And I say, there's no need to be embarrassed. It's not your fault. Because the fact that you have moved from one year or one grade to the next, and there is no balances and checks to say, well, yes, you are at that level, move on, because you're just on a conveyor belt. So don't worry about it. I'm here to show you how good you really are. And when you break down maths, you find what was all the fuss about. What was, and by excelling in maths, it has a domino effect in all your other areas like science, history, English. It's like an unseen power. All of a sudden, because you become fluid in mathematics, it has a domino effect in whatever else you do. But when your mathematics is poor, it's an uphill struggle on all your other subjects. Does anybody want to interject? I feel as if I'm
any questions?
Questions? Dr. Tata, I could go on here all night, but I'm mindful that is.
I'm okay. I'm okay. You see, like I said, in the background room, it's quite interesting to just sit sometime and listen. And because the many things that you're saying is so profound. It's so profound. Why? I particularly, I have to take my own example, and I think everyone watching would tell us that mathematics growing up on the continent was like, it is a rocket science. And then it was, first of all, a segregative kind of a subject that was taught only men or the boy child should do mathematics. So, you know, girls were discriminated in that case, or less privileged to say, oh, no, we do arts and science and music and domestic science and stuff like that. You know, household work and mathematics. No, that's not my thing. It is for people that want to be engineer or doctors or stuff like that. So it becomes a stereotype kind of a thing. And so mathematics was never something that you could enjoy. Immediately you have that conception, automatically the fear comes in, and then you are, you're marginalized in that concept. And if you look at the continent today, or most women that are scientists, scientific women with research, and it is very few, because no one, and in our generation, when we saw a woman that was mathematician, automatically you're given this patriarchy, look like he's a man. How could they be doing math? But what you're telling us is just like the sister on agriculture in Zimbabwe, in Zambia, that said agriculture has to be made sexy. So you're doing mathematics in a kind of way that is enjoyable. When I listen to the Empress folk and the way you describe it, even when the princess described it, it was like a melody. It was like music. It was like something that is enjoyable, But we thought mathematics is a no-go. I mean, it's just good. Go ahead. We're listening. We're learning.
What's in my journey, in my sojourn, what I've come across, many of us as Black people, Africans, who have been given the title of mathematician, many of us believe the hype that because now all of a sudden our children and people who know, we become sort of like we're no longer tangible. We're no longer touchable.
Exactly.
I want people to know that I'm a regular king. I'm a regular king, just like any other Black man. I'm a regular king, and I can sit down and reason with any king. And I can break down mathematics in a way that if you've never heard it before, all of a sudden you understand it. And the reason why, because you're hearing the truth. And because we are originally from the truth, we align to it. And it's as simple as that. But many of our mathematicians, they talk up here. They talk up here, and they're giving you some formulas, and they're not giving you the fuzzy bit in the middle, because they've been taught by the system. My students, I teach them the fuzzy bit in the middle. For example, let me just give you a quick example. If you have a fraction and you want to convert it into a decimal, for example, a half. Now, a half is equal to 0.5, and that's what they leave you with. No, not for me. I need to give you that fuzzy bit in the middle. That bit is the glue, because if you understand how I got from one place to the next, then when the next one comes along, you can get from one place to the next. You don't need to contact pi ratio. And so I will teach you that fractions is just a posh way of saying division. It's just a posh way of saying division, because the 1 at the top is the numerator, the 2 at the bottom is the denominator. And all you are doing is dividing 1 by 2. 2, how many times does 2 go into 1? Well, we all know it doesn't go. So you put a 0 and then you put a point. Once you put a point, you add a 0 to the 1, because what you're saying is, after the point, any number that come along is less than 1. That's what you're saying when you put that point there. So now your question is, how many times does 2 go into 10? Well, 2 goes into 10 5 times. There you go. So half is equal to 0.5. There you have it. And maths is that simple. Doesn't matter what discipline you're dealing with. It is that simple. It's just that the person who is teaching it or showing you, many of them, they don't, some of them only have the mathematical level of grade 8s. Many of the teachers in the schools, they don't go higher than grade 8. And so they only have a question and answer sheet. And so they give you the question, you get it wrong, and then they give you the answer. But the bit in the middle, the glue that you need, the formula, the process, because once you have a formula, you then have to apply it. And once you apply it, you come to the answer.
Could you just, you said something in the beginning that I find it so interesting, like the park ticket. But if we know the formula, it is even easy for us to avoid it.
Okay.
From that example, just give a clear example of that situation in a mathematical way.
All right. Okay. Now, I said to you, I also said earlier that everything has a formula.
Yes.
You're presenting your show today, but there is a formula behind that. But let's look at the parking ticket. I go to court. So when I go to court now, I have to convince the judge that it wasn't my fault or whatever else. How am I going to do that? Well, I look at the formula behind communication. Now, the formula behind communication is very simple. A person you're speaking to, only 7% of what you say makes up their truth. So you're on your platform here, only 7% of what you say makes up their truth. The way you present what you say is 38%, and 35% is how you say it and what they see. Once I know that formula, I'm going to go to court, make sure that I look the part, and then speak in the way that they expect me to speak or what they want to hear. Because I'm dealing with the formula, what I say. And I'm going to say what I say, but they're only going to take 7% of that. Only 7%. The way I say it, so they want you to address them in a certain manner because you're in their court. It's their system. Many of us go there with an attitude. So as soon as you go there with an attitude, they just say, yeah, typical black. That's what they say, right? But no. We were here before them, right? So now I know that formula for communication. the maths behind communication is that formula. So you apply that formula to that, and it helps you resolve the problem. Then they want dialect. They want to have a conversation. They don't just push out your pro, and that's how this works.
This is so true. This is so true. Why am I saying this is so true? Because now, particularly in the diaspora, even, you know, our children are always like, they are so hyperactive, or they are so, you know, emotional. And so, like, when you are stopped even in control in the checks, and an African by nature, when you react, they're like, oh, he was overreacting. And that's why I had to shoot first, because I thought he touched the book and I felt it was a gun. You know, that overreaction.
Exactly.
And so that's what you're trying to say. The formula is like they already expect we would overreact.
Exactly.
And now, if we know the formula that in interpersonal communication or body language or whatever, I mean, then we can master their own way of life as well, or what to do.
You have to understand, they have shrouded our mathematics in their system. If you're able to understand these formulas and present it to them, they lose their mind. Because don't forget, they're not very creative.
Yes.
They're not very creative. They only jump on what we have already created. So that is, we have them every time. So maths, I'm telling you, right? It works. It works in your relationship. It works for your family, and it works. If you speak to my Empress, before I was applying it to all of this, you know, do you want to speak, Empress? You want to?
Of course, I'm still going to have to have this so she will have to speak.
How maths has changed this relationship? How has it helped this relationship? The relationship we're in. You were frustrated for a period of time. Talk to them.
Okay, so we had a period in our relationship where, for me, myself, I was very frustrated because the king wasn't stepping up to what he was supposed to be doing. And I knew that he was more than capable. But obviously, he was going through whatever he was going through. So I had to come up, and I don't do like the literal mathematics working out on board, because obviously I'm with him and I'm learning in the background. So I know how to come up with certain formula to get him to listen to what I'm saying, that it's not noise or I'm nagging, but I'm using maths to get him to understand what I'm saying. So I would come up with things that we would have a meeting together, and I would put it on the table for him to see. And I'd be like, you teach maths, you can't be out teaching the world mathematics, and we here as a family is not benefiting from it. So when I do it so when I put it out to him like that now, then he sits up straight and he's listening, you know. So that is how I use it for him to pay attention. Because sometimes it's a bit like a dentist. A dentist can't pull out his own teeth. You know, he'd have to get another dentist to pull out his own teeth. So Pyration needs to be reminded that, hello, we need to use maths as well as you're teaching the entire world. You know, so that's what we do, and we organize our meetings. It's not always consistent.
Yes.
You know, so yes.
Yeah.
There is a question, there is a comment in the chat, and I find this so interesting. K Felt is saying, women are the original mathematicians on their menstrual cycle. There is also a formula behind, isn't it, Empress?
Yes. But I, to be honest, I myself is not fully. I'm just learning as well. I'm just learning. Yeah.
All right. Now let us listen from the princess. She read a very interesting, you know, I would like her to just read it again, because most of our listeners or followers maybe are just joining now. Some are also saying, hey, don't worry, Pirate Show, I'm cooking. Prodigal Son say, I'm cooking because I'm hungry, but I'm listening. I'm listening everything. When I sit down to take my dinner, I would just watch the whole and enjoy the whole show. And I know a lot. Koboko Sauce just came in and like, oh, I had to rush because I didn't want to miss this. I'm just jumping. Johnny Boy, Sinovia, Riley, all of our team and the backyard, and everyone is here. So I want Princess to just read about what he said because it was like music in my ears. Princess.
Do you want to say something before you speak? Happy homeschool.
Okay, well, before I read it, I want everyone to know that I am homeschooled and maths has like helped a lot in my other subjects and what I'm doing at home.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mathematics is a universal language that enables understanding of the world. It's an integral part of the curriculum beyond the study of numbers, shapes, and patterns. It also provides important tools for work in fields such as engineering, physics, architecture, medicine, and business. It nurtures the development of logical and methodical mindset, as well as helping to inculcate focus and the ability to solve all manner of problems. Mathematics is an integral part of every school curriculum. It is a foundation of many disciplines and a source of interest and enjoyment in itself. It also unlocks the door to further study and employment in a vast range of fields.
So research.
And that article is a research article from Ofsted. Ofsted are a governing body who supposedly are supposed to be looking out for the best interests of the children here in the UK who attend state schools. And that was an article
it was published March 25th. No, May 25th. Sorry, and
Yes.
it's actually a long article. So if you're somebody who don't like reading, it's going to be a lot to read. But it's a very, very interesting article. It breaks down the importance of mathematics and the important role that parents has to teach mathematics to their children from basic, as I was saying, from conception to when the child is born. You know, it's a very interesting article, but it's quite long.
But I guarantee you, the reason why it's so long is because they know
we're not going to read it.
They know we're not going to read it.
Yeah.
They know that many of us are not going to read it. That's why they put it there.
To be honest,
Yes.
when I found that research and I was reading, I was just cursing. I'm like, who's got time to sit down and read this long thing? Why can't you just break it down in small bits? You've done this research. It's literally like you probably need about 2 hours to read it. I'm not exaggerating. That's how long it is. And I'm like, these people just make things so complicated.
Do it on purpose. Done on purpose.
But yeah.
I mean, this is something, Rachel. Why, for instance, is there not going to be a future where they're going to remove all these algebras and all this, these symbols in mathematics? Like they could start replacing it, just like a Princess was saying. It's a fluid, but right now it is so static. And like I look at you as a family and I ask, like, do you calculate everything that you do in the family? Like, I want to drink a glass of water and I want to make a speech and I want to sleep. I don't know what side I have to sleep. If Princess want to trick mom and dad, that she has a formula, to say, I want to, that's.
Well, you make an excellent point, because you see, once you shroud your children in the mathematic veil, you find that they get attuned and their instincts become autonomic.
Yeah.
It becomes autonomic because, for example, today my daughter, she gets how much does she get? 6.
Mm-hmm.
She gets £6 pocket money. She gets £6 pocket money a week. £6, right?
Okay.
And it goes onto her card. And it hadn't topped up today when it should have done. And she made it quite clear. She made me know it hadn't topped up. and so, it's really important. Miles said to me the other day that he has been asking for a mobile phone. Mm-hmm. Now, he wasn't getting through to me. So what he did, he spoke with, who did he speak to?
We went on the Philippines.
Oh, we was on the Felipe.
The maths behind
Yes, the ref shock. Yes.
That's behind communications. And Miles, what did you say to Felipe?
I said, can he communicate with my dad for me to ask him what that I can get for him?
Why?
Because he weren't communicating.
Speak louder. So you see what I'm saying to you? So what they're doing is they're using it back at me now, because now he said, well, okay, I know Felipe can communicate. So if I can get Felipe on my side to communicate on my behalf, then Dad will get him a phone.
Wow.
So you know, and we talk about when is it going to get easy. Maths is not difficult. It's who teaches you.
Yeah.
For example, Dr. Tata, you mentioned some of your listeners are cooking. Well, there's a formula behind cooking. And you see that formula, we as a people, it's handed down because it's natural. Our formula is based on smell, feel, touch, taste. Other cultures, they have to write it down in a book and measure it, and then all of a sudden it becomes official because they've written it down. But when they come to where you are and you teach them, and how you teach them, we sprinkle, but we taste to find that correct taste. We don't measure. You know, they take it and they measure it, and because you don't have it noted down, it becomes theirs.
This is so crazy. I'm telling you, we eat the most healthiest food. We cook most tasty food.
Yeah.
But because we don't put a formula of decoration that you eat with the eyes, then it's as if our food is just trash because it doesn't look good. It's a formula. We don't measure and say it's 1 pound of ice or I could chip in a salt. We cook emotionally and that kind of fluid thing. So what is the formula that even if we will have to use, we don't want to use their formula. It is so dry and static. Now, so in the development of our own formula, how are we going to do that?
It's just being aware that we're using maths.
Yeah, there you go. I said before that it's really important that did you want to say something, Chris?
No, go ahead.
It's really important that we as African people, we understand mathematics. We don't understand the power. We are on automation. A lot of what we do is very high level mathematics, but we just do it.
It becomes natural.
It becomes so natural. When we create things, they have to put things through a computer to come up with a certain design. We as a people, we use our bare hands and create things. They think, wow, how did you do that? All of a sudden they want to measure around it. They want to put this shape around it. They want to package it. And all of a sudden, because they have the numbers, it's theirs.
Okay, Parental, before we even miss out the conversation, now we want to, it would be a humble pleasure to have the Parental family with us, gathering all our own families at least once a week for this, teaching our children mathematics. It's too much. I can tell you every day from what you're saying. I can tell you every day, but because I know that you are already. How do we get access to this? You teaching. I mean, it's not mathematics to our children, but it's a family thing, like you said. Now, how often can we get you? I know the Naisha is already telling me next week you're going to be on the Namibia Rwanda week. And she didn't even ask, and she just said you have to be, because this is so necessary what you are doing. How often can you come to teach us these things on the Pan-African Daily?
Well, because I'm looking at the numbers, what I would say is if we could maybe discuss it off air, we would definitely come up with something, because I want to be consistent, because maths is consistent. You have to be consistent to really get the flavor and feel of maths and to understand it. We as a family want to be consistent. What we say, we want to be consistent. So we don't want to tell you anything on air that we can't deliver. So I would prefer to come up with something, and then we definitely talk off air, we make something happen.
Exactly. But the issue was, it's possible.
Of course.
Yes.
Of course it is.
Yeah. Good. Fine. Yes. Junior, the way you're just sitting with your afro, I look at you, it's like you look at Michael Jackson at the age of 3, 4.
Yeah.
You know, it's so sweet, this afro. And like, you want to share something with us? Finally, did the formula work that you asked Ref Shock to ask Daddy to facilitate so that you get the phone? Junior, tell us what happened after that formula.
Well, I mean, my dad didn't say no, and it wasn't a yes either, but it's getting there.
All right. And then what about topping your 6 pounds a week? Did it actually just happen, or the formulas can also stretch out for the next week?
Well, I basically 6 pounds is Maya's base and 4 pounds is Mars's base, because for me, I really think it's important that you value numbers.
Yes.
Because for me, we don't just pluck 4 pounds out the year. It's going to come from somewhere. Now, as a family unit, we are all components in that equation.
Yeah.
Because that's another talk for another day, because families have their own formula.
Yes.
Each family has their role.
And each component in that equation has their own duty.
Yeah.
It's a bit like the formula that Einstein derived, E = mc squared. That formula only works because all the units work in tandem. If one of those units decided, you know what, I ain't going to do my job, you wouldn't get the answer. So you have to have all of the components in the formula doing their job. But to do their job, they have to know what their job is.
So, for example, sorry.
Yes, of course.
So Kimaya deals with the technology side of things.
Mm.
I deal with the creative side of things. Miles deals with the fun side of things.
Yes.
Yeah. So when each month when they get their pocket money, like I think it was January, February, and March, they didn't get no pocket money because, as far as I was concerned, they did not do what they were supposed to do. So I said to their dad that I think they shouldn't get no pocket money for the next 3 months, because they need to feel it. They need to see it and know that it don't just come like that. And of course I got looks and all the looks and everything, but
Impressed, I don't want to be you in that look.
And then when those 3 months were up, they went to their dad and they said, because they always go to daddy first, they went to daddy and daddy said, okay, let me ask mommy if you deserve it. Of course, looks again. And we discussed it as a family, and they deserved it. And trust me, Kimaya has stepped up 10 times more.
And I'm telling you.
Just based on those 3 months, because sometimes they need to step back and see, because things don't just come like that. You need to work for it.
Absolutely.
You need to show that you're contributing to what we're doing as well. And Miles the same, and it works.
Yep.
It's not just giving them what they want when they want. No, because they want to appreciate it.
We also want to get this formula going on, even on the continent. Like, we know there is a reason why, particularly in the Western, children will get pocket money. It helps in terms of calculation, in terms of responsibility, in terms of even just knowing money. And that's why we're thinking that we're so vulnerable growing up on the continent, when somebody gives you money and money becomes like it's something. And so the need, the greed, the illusion about money is because we never started to teach them the small amounts of money and how, if you don't have it, you need to do something to earn it. And so we're really coming up with that structure to empower parents. It doesn't matter. Start it at a $1. It is a means of an African child in the village, in the community, to have a feel and to know numbers and money.
Even Dr. Tata, sorry, even within that pocket money that they get, they have to save in that pocket money.
Yes.
Kimaya broke her iPad screen, and it cost £80. I paid for it, but she had to pay me back the £80, which is £5 a month from that pocket money.
Correct.
And it's going to take 8 months. It's going to take her 8 months to pay that off. Is it 8 months?
Well, 5, 8 to 40.
Yeah.
£8, yeah.
Yeah.
5, 8 to 40. So
You know, so and these are life lessons that children need to know and overstand from young. It's not a punishment. It's a life lesson that they need to learn. You know.
Tell us more, Pi Ratio. Just tell us more about your experiences and how you've been doing this juggling and how we can learn from it. It's so interesting.
Well, you know, for me, like I say, maths for me is an absolute passion. From the time I get up.
Oh, can I say?
Go ahead.
So he's got 2 wives.
I've got
so
2.
Pi Ratio's got 2 wives. So this is how we say that we know our roles. So I'm the second wife and Mass is his first wife. I know my position. That's it.
You're not jealous, Empress. Are you not jealous?
No.
Oh, okay. So your first husband's wife is the Matt, and you're the second in a polygamous family of Matt and wife, right?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes. So I know my position. Yes. Go ahead.
What for me, maths for me is an absolute passion. From the time I get up in the morning to the time I go to bed.
Yes.
What I've had to learn is that as a king that has a queen, you are responsible for meeting the family needs. And you are responsible for using your skills to make that happen. Before, it wasn't like that.
Yeah.
My head would be buried in the books and what have you, and you know, things was coming in and I just wasn't aware of it, and sometimes I just ignored it, didn't want to deal with it. Now, I've said the last few years,
it's more organized.
It's totally organized because we've applied the formulas to our lives. We don't walk around with formulas and say, well, right, we've got to do this. It doesn't work like that. You know, once you get structure and you get order, because that's what maths is. Maths gives you structure. It gives you order. Clears up chaos. People cannot hide behind the numbers, you know? So even if you're learning addition, and I'm not going to say basic addition, because addition covers a big area. Because addition, you have to deal with not only 2, 3, 4 numbers or whatever, you have to deal with decimals. You have to deal with different types of addition, adding fractions. You know, addition is not just 1 plus 2 plus 3. So I teach our children. Now, first and foremost, there are only 9 numbers. There are only 9 numbers, 1 to 9. Those are the only numbers you're ever going to deal with. And a placeholder, which is 0. Any other number you deal with is a composite, a combination of those numbers. So straight away, you begin to say, all right, can't
once
be.
you get to 9, you start
you start over again. So it can't be that bad because all you're dealing with is 9 numbers. Once that sits right in your head, I then give you an understanding of what each number means, because it's not only the math side of it, you've got the spiritual side of it, because you need to, it's like a coin. One side is heads and the other side is tails. I'm not sure what the coins are in your part of the world, but that's how it is over here. Numbers is no different. Numbers are very powerful.
Positive and the negative.
In our schools, in our walk of life, you leave your place of work, and if you go somewhere, like you go to the bank to get a loan or what have you, right? You go in there and your neighbor, who happens to be white, goes in there. They seem to get it and you don't understand why. Well, they have a thing called a logarithms. A logarithm is just a formula, an algebraic formula, which basically they have put into the system that says, all right, if anybody comes in here who is of a darker hue and their postcode is XYZ, then I don't care what they've got, the answer is no. See, you don't know this because you're filling in the form and what have you. So it's really important that you understand the meaning of numbers, how they work, how you apply them, how you move them around, and all these things. And so you have to start from the beginning. I don't assume that you know this or you know that. I'm taking you on a journey. It's like reading a good book. So after you learn the 4 basics, you can start to intertwine them. Now you're dealing with the other subjects like fractions and calculus and all of these other subjects, probabilities, all these other subjects, simultaneous equations. All you're doing is dealing with those same 9 numbers. You have to remember that. And now all you're doing is just using them in different ways. That's all you're doing. And so when you see how easy it is, you wonder what the fuss is all about, because mathematics should be taught like how you hold somebody's hand, you hold hand, next hand. Each unit should be like that. Not they teach you adding today, and they teach you algebra tomorrow, then they teach you calculus the next day, then they teach you probabilities. No. It's supposed to be in sync so you can see where the connection is. So when you move from one discipline to the next, there are remnants of the old discipline you left, so you feel comfortable with the new discipline that you're going to start. And that's how it is. And that's how it is.
Do you offer online classes? I have a comment in the chat. If you offer online classes, but yes.
Yes, I do. But I'll give you all the details so that you can share, because it's really important that, you know, not only do I offer online courses, but we've created programs. You know, I've created a massive program which covers the whole of the academic syllabus. It's over 250 units that we cover, and it breaks down every one into small chunks. So you can subscribe to these, and then you can watch it, and what you're not sure of, you just rewind it.
Wow.
And so that's another way of the learning, because the one-on-one, as much as I want to teach everybody, there's just not enough hours in the day, and there's just not enough days in the week.
Correct.
And it's very difficult to get to everybody.
Yes.
So, you know, I my time is spent that is more of a sort of a would you say consult?
Research.
More, I teach at a high level, but I also, you know, because I used to teach at the level where it was just, you know, taking you on this journey. But to take somebody on a journey is very difficult, as I say, because you can't do it for everybody. You cannot do it for everybody. What I do is because we want the masses to get this.
Yes.
If one, if one subscribes, for example, and it's a minimal fee, if one subscribes and they're doing it, then they have access to Pi Ratio, because now they can email me, you know, and they can get feedback from me. And there are times when I hold monthly webinars, where they can get me, they jump on and they can get me and they can talk with me and they can put problems to me and things like that and stuff like that. But if I want the masses to get it, it's not going to happen just by me alone. So I've had to create some kind of, you know, but we'll share all of that with you so that you can give it to your viewers. Yes.
Okay, that is so true. There is something that you said. You know, we from the Kemet, we are the Kemet University here on the Pan-African Daily, but we are coming up with this institute called GIPA. GIPA is Global Institute for Pan-African Studies. Yeah, and we're putting all the affiliate professors together. Of course, you're already one in the sector of mathematics, but because it is difficult to transport knowledge, like we're saying, the epistemology of, you know, of Africa. It is difficult to transport our daily realities into knowledge, how we appreciate it, how we deal with it, without putting an aspect of spirituality. And that's just what you did.
All right. Right. You see, as I said, in my sojourn, what I have done, I have understand the importance of spirituality as a people. It's you see, if you don't have that, if you don't have some level of that, you turn to someone else's belief. That's what happens, because there's a void. It's a bit like as women, when you're in your home, you design your homes very well, and each area has a plant somewhere or what have you. And if there's not a plant or something there, it's like a void. You have to fill it with something. Well, it's the same with us as a people. If we're not connected with our truths, then it's filled with falsehood.
Correct.
And that's the key, because if you have if you're connected to what is the truth, then mathematics is part of that. Because once you understand or get access to what our spirituality is, mathematics appears, because mathematics is part of who we are. Getting mathematics across to our people, I don't believe is difficult. I think it's very easy. But the thing is, I mentioned it earlier, as a people, and I don't know where it comes from, I did mention where I think it comes from, we don't trust our own. We trust those that don't even look like us. When people first were signing up to my classes, I had our queens and kings, when they were asking me what my inside leg measurement was, what my head size was, what my neck size was, all of this. And I didn't have a problem sharing that with them, but I had to let them know this. I said, what I don't understand is this. You've brought your child to me to teach, and I'm humbled by that. But your child has been in state school and is still in state school over a number of years. And you haven't asked their teacher, who has been teaching them for the past 4 or 5 years, their neck size, their inside leg measurements, and your children are getting low grades. And now you'll come looking for help. You're asking all the questions that you should have been asking the teacher of your child. And I'm always happy to answer any question, because questions were made to be answered. But we have to keep this very real. Our children are in the condition they are in because of the teachers who are teaching them. It's very simple, right? And so if we as parents were doing our job, and that goes back to knowing your roles in the formula, in the family formula. If you know what your unit is supposed to be doing, I guarantee you, every time you went to school, the teachers would deal with you and your child with trepidation. With trepidation. But because they don't expect too much from little Miles or little Kumaya. They've already pigeonholed your child, right? They focus on things like, well, yeah, your child has an attitude. Your child has doesn't listen. And they're not realizing, we as parents are not realizing, well, a genius, their mind is all over the place. A genius's mind is all over the place. And you as a teacher, because a teacher, your job is to bring knowledge to the level of the listener. So if a genius is listening to you, you need to bring that knowledge to genius level. It's not rocket science. If you're bringing the message to a blind person, don't write on the board. You deal with audio or you deal with braille. If somebody is deaf, you're not going to speak to them. You're going to write it on the board, or you're going to make sure that they can see. You have to find out, but what they don't do, our children, there's none of our children they put in genius category. Every time a black child sees something great, it makes news, right? because it's not supposed to be the norm. And they treat that child as if that child is a freak of nature, as if he or she has just come out of the circus that has come into town. And wow, look, we've got this child, and this child can do maths and blah blah, because it's not the norm, it's not what they expect. And so we all as a people, when we see this, we think, oh, this is fantastic, and this is what have you. But what about all the other geniuses who they haven't highlighted? You see, they know why they're highlighting whoever they're highlighting. Because if they highlight somebody who has a balance of spirituality as well as mathematics, they don't want to be doing that, because it's going to make them seem weak and inefficient. And they have to have individuals who are going to make their system look good.
What about the young lady who got suspended 8 times? You want to share that story?
Oh,
she is? Yeah.
I had a student. She was suspended 8 times. She was suspended 8 times from school. 8 times. Now, if you see that on a child's report, if you see that on a child's report, you would think to yourself, wow. Now, I taught that young queen, I taught her maths and science. She had 1 hour of maths a week and 1 hour of science a week. She's a natural chemist. She's a natural chemist. Very inquisitive. But why is it like this? But why is it like that? That is what we need. Because the person who's giving you this information should be able to answer it. Now, if she was heavy. Every time I taught her, I had to go for my books. I had to make sure my office was like, I'm going to use Einstein because everyone knows Einstein. It was like his laboratory. Books were all over the place. And that is what we need. She's an absolute genius, right? She said to me, and even though she's a genius, she said to me, and these are her words, she said, Siba, you are the best thing since sliced bread. Because she likes bread. And I am the best thing since sliced bread. And why? Because she feels comfortable, she feels love, and no problem was ever too small to break down. Even if you ask me 20 times.
Oh, yes.
If you ask me 20 times, I'm going to break it down, you know? And because I want to know what it is you are doing. I tell my students, first thing you must do, you've got to understand the question. Well, how are you going to understand it? Read it. You read it the first time, you don't understand it. You read it again, you don't understand it. You read it 3 times. Why do you read it 3 times? Because the triangle is the most powerful shape on the face of the earth. The triangle. It has 3 sides, right? Many of the roofs here in Europe are shaped like a triangle. Why is that? Because they are the strongest roofs, and you have to use the least material, which is geometry. So, and with a triangle and the base, when you have a problem, you put the problem in the triangle. The triangle also has a cause. The cause goes in the triangle. And who is it affecting goes in the triangle. So you now have the problem in the triangle. You can now create a formula to resolve the problem. So you have to, when you're a student and you're at school, you have to read a question 3 times. And then you still don't understand it. You know why you don't understand it? Because the question doesn't belong to you. We have many of our students, they have become lazy because the system has taught them to be lazy. You need to write that question in your book. By writing it in your book, you're using your own words, and it now becomes yours. It is now your problem. It was not your problem before because it was somebody else's. It was in a book. Write it and put it in a book. It becomes your problem. You put it in your words. And once you put it in your words, you convert those words to a formula. And then you resolve the formula. Simple.
Wow. This is exceptional. You're making me to start loving math.
You always loved it because you are from
just
maths.
Reigniting.
Yes, that's all I'm doing.
Yeah.
You know, you can't love something that you don't know. You love maths because you are part of maths. It brings order, it brings structure, it brings harmony.
What Pyracia said just now, because I'm doing an online course, and the other day it had some maths formula in there. And when I saw the numbers, straight away I started to panic. I'm like, no, I need to wait for Pyracia to wake up and ask him. And then I paused and I'm like, no, you need to read the question. I had to remind myself just what he said. No, you need to read it, because I didn't read it. I just saw the numbers and I just started doing this.
Exactly.
I was explaining to him, and when I read it 3 times, I kid you not, and I wrote it out, and I'm like, oh, it says 1.2 breathe in, 1.3 breathe in. That means 1 breath in, 2 breath out, 3 breath in, because I didn't read it.
It's ratios.
I just let the number just get me all dizzy, and I'm like, no, calm down, read the question, then write it out, and that's what I did, and I got it.
This is what we want to give to our children. This is what we want
just
them to have.
so simple. So
yes,
because I don't know maths like that, but just by Pyracia saying these examples of how, just read the questions, read it 3 times, write it out. You will get it.
It works. It works.
You will get it.
It works.
You know. So yeah. And
I tell my students, you have to remember. When your lecturer or your teacher gives you a question, if you have to think, you don't know the answer. Did you know that? Because if I ask you what 2 and 2 is, I'm assuming you're going to tell me it's 4. You don't have to think about that. You know it. So it's in your memory. It's sitting there. All you have to do is go and get it. That's what maths is. When you know it, all you have to do is go and get it. You only start thinking when you don't know. If I said to you, can you tell me what my Empress's middle name is? You could think from now until tomorrow, you'd never get the answer because you don't know. But if I tell you what her name is, and then I ask you next week, you're going to say, oh, what is it again? You see, because now you have to go into your memory and search it. And that's another program, how to retain memory, because maths is all about regurgitating and bringing back out the information that you've been studying. Because many of us study, and then when we go in the exams, man, we just, we lose it. For whatever reason, we just lose it. Well, it's about managing your memory. And that's all part of mathematics, a game, which, you know, is for another day. But yeah.
Wow. This is, I don't know, this is so powerful. It's like, when a lot of people were asking, what is biracial? You know, it's just static. And I was thinking, all right, let's discover. But it's like, we don't even want to leave you. You said something, and I think it's very relevant. I mean, when I was studying, like here, once the teacher comes in, I'm just like, it's not for me. Because first I was the only black student in university. And so that connection, like you said, just you as an African father, you know, connecting. And that's why you talk about this spirituality is 150% obvious, because my German counterparts and students, when the lecturers came in, they felt connected. You know, they laughed, they did slangs in their dialect and stuff. And I was just like in a missing place, you know, like just out of it. That connection first was not there. And so it also determined what I would take in from that class and what I would not take in. Just being sidelined and being in the wrong place with the wrong people was already my defeat. What about that?
And this is designed. It's done on purpose. Because even at your level and going to college or university, you shouldn't be made to feel like that. It's supposed to be inclusive. If you look at all their paraphernalia, they tell you that we run an inclusive system. So why do we feel ostracized? Why do we feel, you know, we've done as much work to get in there as you? Why do we not feel it? Because, as you say, it's a different frequency. They will never understand us. And we feel inadequate. And what we get dumbed down because we don't feel part of. It's maths again. You feel like a fraction because they're all in there speaking their twang or whatever they speak and they think, and you don't get it. They're laughing, you don't get it. But you're supposed to be on your P's and Q's when the lesson starts. But no, it doesn't work like that. It does not work like that. But that's designed. It's designed that way. It's designed because those who do get it have made themselves part of their system. They're twanging with them. They're involved in their little clique thing and what have you. Yeah, second frequency. As Felipe, my brother, would say, they create. So if you want to get involved in that,
it's almost like losing a part of
you're
yourself.
losing part of yourself to become part of their system because you want to be accepted by them. Why? Because we don't have our own system and there's no other system to be accepted by. That's the reason. And, you know, and so many of those individuals are thinking very singularly. They're very thinking about their self and not realizing that they are just being used as a pawn in a game of chess. And when the time comes, they are going to be using you, right, to deal with our people. That is what they're doing. You understand? This is what you look at many of us. I mentioned it, alluded to it earlier when I spoke about many of our leaders. You know, they learnt the art of corruption in Europe. That's where they learnt it. Yep. They learnt it in Europe. Let me tell you.
That's true. I agree.
And they learnt how to manipulate words. They learned how to manipulate numbers. You know, they may tell you something and they will tell you the average is this. But what they're not sharing with you that, well, the average in maths, mean, median, mode. There's 3 different types of averages. So you're going to use an average that suits you. But when you tell people the average, the masses who don't really know are going to say, wow, nah, man, the average, I've got to jump on that, man, because the average. Not realizing that, well, they're using an average that works for them. Because maths is powerful. Maths can do that. So if you're not asking the right questions, you just take what they say literally. So, right, man. Okay.
So, Black Raven, thank you so much for your support. For your super chat. It's very, very warm-heartedly. If you support, it's just like you're saying, the brother, the family is just doing a very massive work for us. And we thank you for your support and all those that are supporting as usual. Now we are getting the solution, even though we're looking it through mathematics, but the whole concept here is we need to start teaching our own. Yes. We need to set our own systems because it's us to us. It is impossible that we will have our children and we hand them over to others to teach them and we expect to get other results. Yes. We're already living in the systems, but this is the new decade for the African where we have to be taught by our own, where we have to back to our history. How were they doing it? And you just said something that is so relevant, and we're doing that research with Nisha. And how did we become corrupt? If we look at our system of ancient Africa and Kemet, and even in the village where I grew in the culture, in African, we have a system of giving, of sharing, and conversation, of thanks. You go even from our traditional weddings to all our setting. You come to visit a family, you bring something. You know, somebody does a work, you show appreciation, you give something. It is a concept of sharing that we had. How did this concept of sharing became corruption? And this topic, we're going to deal with it very, very, because we keep talking African leaders are corrupt, Africans are corrupt. We take bribery. We have never did the imperial studies of how did we come to bribery? What was the African ancient culture of giving? And what was bribing as a matter of fact? Where did we come with these systems? In the Kemet, we never knew about that. We gave. It's the same thing. A governor is elected, they go with the plantains and a goat. A governor is coming home, you see the village will cook food and everyone would bring something. It was a culture to give. Now, how did this translate that you want a favor and you have to take that? So these are all topics we'll be treating here because it is very relevant that we stop the stereotyping and the narrative. That's why I'm thankful for what you just said. Everything that we do that is misleading, we learn it from the second frequencies. We all learn it.
We also have to remember, you know, that as a people, because you raised an excellent point. When did all of this start? We as a people, we are very accommodating.
Yes.
And we are very accommodating. And people, other nations treat our good nature as a sign of weakness. And that is where the problem lies. Because as you said, back in the time when you go from one place to the next, you share this, you give that, and vice versa, and whatever. But it's only once we allowed others in, the dynamics changed. The dynamics changed because then what they did, they came in and divide and rule. Do you understand what I'm saying? You know, yes. I can give you a simple example, very, very simple example. On the road that we live on, it's just very simple. We've lived there. Well, I've lived there for a number of years because my parents came from the Caribbean, and we bought the place. And you could not get Europeans in this area for love or money. That's again, you couldn't get them in this area for love or money. And it was only when the place became really run down that many of the black families, they left, and then the white families came in. We're probably the only black family on this road. The properties now are ridiculous. Why? Because those people are here. And when we were here, those prices were not here. It's all maths again. So they make you feel worth less. You see, it's a psychological thing, right? They play with numbers. It's the same house. It hasn't changed. But when black people were living there, it only cost this amount. But as soon as a next set of people come in, all of a sudden, these prices are going through the roof. So when you see these things as children growing up and you see these things, you want to align yourself to these system, to their system. But if we had our own system, we could give our children the understanding of all of this on a daily basis, because it's got to be consistent. Has to be, you know, got to be. Yeah.
Correct. We are 12 minutes into getting on the next speaker on the show, who is Professor James Small. Yes, and Professor James Small is going to treat with us this African liberation, how it all started.
Wow.
Starting from the Berlin 1884, he's going to do a total lecture on the timeline, because this is history, like you say. Everything we've been miseducated. Now we have to correct it. And to correct it, like Professor Obatishaka said, we need to go back. We need to go back into the future. It's like running a race. You first of all retreat, then you move and you jump. So now what we're doing is retreating, like exactly what you're saying. And then we come to the line to sprint, to give a, to jump. And so it is very relevant what you were just saying and why this show is connecting the other to end this week of the liberation, because you just break a spell. And what Empress said and all what you've been teaching us is this igniting, decoding or sparking up the code that was just dormant in us. Like you say, mathematics is us. It is us. And now what Professor James is going to be treating with us in the next 2 hours or 3 hours that is coming is exactly how did the Germans, how did they sit together first, organize, and partition Africa? Now, from the one point, we know they came in. But from the other point, like you said, we are accommodating. Because we accommodated them with goodwill to know that, okay, they're coming, you know, like missionaries, they brought the Bible. And before we realized we were in the boat and they were on the land. Exactly, because we are accommodating. Now, it is a new decade. Should the African just continue to be, say, it is our nature of accommodating? No. Now we are understanding how do we accommodate each other? How are we using our own generosity, openness, hospitality? Now, what should we be cautious in when we're dealing with others that we never did decades ago? Over to you. You rounding?
You made an excellent point, because and you've hit the nail right on the head. When are we going to start accommodating our own?
Yes.
We are very, very quick to accommodate others who mean us no good.
Mm-hmm.
Mean us no good. It doesn't matter how they come. Many of them, they've learnt the formula behind communication, right? Whenever they in other areas around the world, they will come and tell you how we're standing for whatever. We would like to get your support, and this is what we're going to do for you, and all this kind of thing. And they've mastered the art of communicating. And if you don't understand the formulas that they are using, all they're doing is just reeling you in. And once they get your support, you don't hear or see from them again. That's got to change, because if we don't change, our children are going to grow up and follow the same path, and we're going to be having this conversation 20, 30, 40, 50 years later, when many of us have passed on to the ancestors. We're still going to be working. Well, how we can't be doing this. Enough is enough. I don't want my children to have to go through what I went through. I didn't have to go through what my forefathers and ancestors went through, but it's just a more technical version, right? Our children now are in the best possible position to make change. Now, they are in the best. It's never going to be as good as this to make change now. Believe me when I tell you. But we have to come together collectively, and we have to start trusting one another. We have to start trusting those who you can see are doing things for the masses and not for themselves. Because we have many within us, within our people, who still have a kind of a second frequency mentality, but the mass will weed out those people. And we have to be very clear that when we do weed them out, there has to be a formula that deals with them. Because you cannot, it's been too long. Many of our great leaders have fallen by the wayside because we've had somebody who is functioning off of a second frequency stab them in the back. Go and deal with other people to move them on. We have to protect our own. We have to put shields around people like yourselves and those who are doing things for the masses. We have to move away from this mine thing and doing it for me and all them. We're never going to get anywhere with that. And that is what they want us to do, right? And if we go down that road, then our children are just going to be lambs to the slaughter. They've got an agenda for our children, right? And if we don't have a plan for them, they have a plan already in place to deal with them.
Oh, that's so true. Empress?
Yes. Sorry, I wasn't here earlier because I had to think, baby. What was it? What was the question?
Can you ask the question again? I'm always.
Sorry. I mean, we're looking at this decade as the most glorious pasture for the African. And we are concluding the Liberation Week, and we can already see and feel the impulse that we are free. It is up to us now, as Africans, to take it back And like the Erasure said, stop that generosity from the outsiders. Now, the one thing that people misunderstand us when we start getting our our identity is they start thinking that we will do the same they did to us. No. What we are saying in this new decade for the liberation of the African is allow us to reposition and know ourselves, then we will work with them. We are not saying that we're cutting you out because that's what you did. No. But let us figure out what our difference is, what is our need. Like the brother Adrian just said in the chat, it is about re-engineering, reversing the engineering, and so the systems that have programmed us are so scared of us coming together thinking that we're going to do the same thing. No, we want to identify, solidify ourselves, just be our own self. And then of course we would work with them. And so if we're accommodating, we already know who they are. So I wanted to hear Empress opinion generally about this. And we're not leaving our children behind. It's a whole collective thing.
So Horatio mentioned something in the beginning where he said that the change has to start from the family.
Yes.
Which is the foundation. And for me, change also has to start with the female as well. Because we do harbor a lot of things that we allow it to fester so much that we can't see anything else. And knowing that we're the one that's giving birth to the nation, to our children, and then we pass that on to them. So we have to be well with ourselves as female first before we can put ourselves out there like that, So it starts with the family. It has to start with the family.
This is so essential and important. While we're waiting on Professor James, when he's in the lobby, I'll let you know. But right now he's still not there, so it's fine. What I'm saying is, I came through an article this morning, and I want to share with you, Hotep family. It's tragic, but it is a lesson. And I'm leaning this on what Empress just said. Now there is a picture virally going on the social media. Apparently, it's even in my country, Southern Cameroon, where I was born. So a woman put to bed and dumped the baby in a well, the water well. And now, but fortunately, this baby was recovered and she's alive. And so it's going viral. And so the question that is surrounding that image is like, how can a mother, a woman, carry a 9-month-old baby, successfully deliver, and then put it in a well and dump the fetus or the baby in a well? And everybody was just like, oh, this is witchcraft. Oh, this is magic. Oh, this was this. And it's going viral. Now, there's one thing that we have to understand, how so sick we have become. We are so sick to the extent that when something happens, like it happens to that sister, I don't know, whatever challenge, whatever trauma she was dealing with or she's dealing with, no mother, even the ones that are psychologically mad or they're going through mental illness, we've seen a lot of these things happen. They nurture their baby, they give birth to their baby, even in their bushes, they keep these babies. Until an African mother is so sick, is going through a mental situation that would give up her baby for no reason. It is not they can feed or take care of the children. I don't agree. It is about a system that we've inherited a lot, and we are so sick, all of us, even us looking at that couple and say, oh, what a witch, or what of this. It's all, you see, even the terms, it's a witch, it's witchcraft, it's black magic, is this. These are all our narratives. These are all our spirituality that is working against us. Now a sister just did something. We don't even know what happened to her. We don't know her situation. But we are the first persons to stand and cast the stones on her. This is something that we need to learn. And that's what you're saying. Women, the female gender, like we heard from Obati Shaka. And we're going to be treating all these things on the Pan-African University that we're building now. We are so sick. And even the system has made us to work against each other unconsciously.
Absolutely. I should agree with that. Okay.
You know, when I'm teaching my daughters certain life skills, I don't hide anything from her. Some of the things that I show her, they're traumatic and they're extreme and they're raw. But it's for her to see what has been done and what can happen. Because if you don't show your children the things as it is raw, there's no point in dressing up things just for them to feel. No, because you don't learn like that. You need to learn raw, the reality of things, because that's how I learned. I grew up in Jamaica. You know, so when I'm teaching my daughter certain things, I show her what happened, what can happen, and I teach them with love as well, and not to be afraid, and not to look at it as something that is, what's the word? That is frightening, but it's to learn from it, you know, and the things that can happen and go wrong, you know. So that's really important. That is really important.
That is so important, like you said, because truth, like you said, is also one of the things that our maybe fathers or parents or we parents do, that we think that some things are hurting and we don't teach our children those things. So we cover up and it becomes a manipulation somehow with us not being conscious. And so what you're saying is for real. I don't remember even us where our parents who actually showed some of these things. We don't talk about rape. We don't talk about abuse. We don't talk about violence, even from men and women. We don't show those things to our girls or to a boy child and say, how do we cover up. Do you have that impression that we really just cover up, like we Africans, we cover up a lot, even our pain, even our history, even the things they did to us. We are afraid to confront this reality, to pass it, to share it with our children. We just go mute.
Even sometimes when if I'm showing my daughter maybe like a video and I tell her that it's a bit graphic, she'll say, Mommy, do I have to watch it? And I said, yes, Kimaya, because I want you to be aware of the things that are out there so you can protect yourself and you're aware of the possibilities. So you don't just walk into things, you're aware of the things that are out there. And she'll watch it, she'll feel a bit down and whatever else, but it's a lesson. Because if you don't teach them, if you don't show it to them, they'll go out there and see it anyway, and then it can affect them in a different way, you know? Sometimes, like, because we're not a perfect family here, sometimes if I speak to the children in a certain manner, before, maybe Pyratia would say, in front of the children, you shouldn't have said that or whatever. So now, what we do is, because sometimes Miles, especially, Miles is like my challenge, you know, he really challenged me, this one here. Yes, he really challenges me, you know? Sometimes his dad would really, really thing with him. And sometimes I get involved, and then later on, Pyratia will pull me aside and he said, don't you dare. When I'm talking to Mars like this, don't you dare get involved. Because you know, as female, we get into our emotions and we're feeling sorry and whatever. And he pulled me up and he said, don't you dare. I should have said that in front of Mars, but I'm just explaining to you how sometimes we try to shield the children from what is right, you know, and that's how we deal with things. Or sometimes I will say to him, you know, you shouldn't have said that to Mars, and he will go and he'll apologize. But I wouldn't say it in front of Mars. I would say behind Mars, and then he would go and say, Mars, you know what I did earlier, I shouldn't have done it, I apologize. You know, and that's how we resolve things. Because we're not perfect, you know. So,
we put it in the triangle.
We put it in the triangle.
The formula of the triangle. Oh, this is so amazing. I all agree. We are all agreeing as one people. Like we say, when we come in the family setup, like we are the Hotep family, we all agree in the Embo Kingdom. Bayete is our word to say we are one. We are one with the first frequency. You know, we are one with ourselves. We are one with the Creator. We are one with what we believe, and we share with one another. We are family. We are one with the first frequency. That's what Red Shock taught us, you know, to always, you know, prophesy or to incantate or to call upon this, awaken this chord of the first frequencies in us. And it's going to help us to gain our consciousness and to wake up from the sleep. Now I saw some comments in the group, like this open kind of conversation, and this is what we're going to come to. We're already going through this biracial family that is setting this physical example, sitting in the boardroom in the studio with the family. And look at how brave they have been. Sometimes we say, oh, they just obnoxious. It's been 2 hours that we are here and everyone is listening attentively. I never saw anybody that complained here. Like, you know, they would tell us our children are hyperactive. They're this. They listen. And they're part of this project. In no way that any person would tell them anything tomorrow. Now, that accountability is what I want to ask Empress. When he asks, how do you feel like a parent? Do you feel challenged? Do you feel disrespected? Do you have the notion, why must he ask? I'm a parent, so I know everything.
You mean like when what was the question again? Sorry.
And the question is like when you said when sorry, when your challenger, you said you have the challenger. When your challenger poses that, how do you feel like a parent? Do you have a kind of like a sense of, oh, why should he ask? I'm the father, I'm the mother, and so like, why do they ask? You feel challenged. Do you feel that?
I do feel challenged, but as Pyracia said, once you're aware of of your role, and for me, I don't allow frustration to get in when we're dealing with the children. It sometimes a little bit, but not as much. And yes, it is challenging. It is very challenging, but we find ways to deal with it where it resolves the challenge.
I'm asking this particularly because, like, you know, in the chat, we are seeing questions or recommendations like, you know, this is what happened, why our leaders cannot be transparent, and this issue of accountability, because we never had started from the root to be open in our discussions, even from the family. And so they don't feel challenged. So you can ask questions. And so when we ask questions, we feel this responsibility of accountability to our own children. And so it's the same thing we would do if we are in leadership positions. You feel accountable, you know that questions would ask. But now the dictatorial and this kind of macho kind of attitude comes out when questions are asked. They question the accountability of your transparency of your budget, and you as a leader in the government, and you feel challenged and you're annoyed and you're like, who should know? Why should they know? Isn't it a principle that starts from the home?
Yes. So for us, we have a family meeting once a week, and we have that on a Sunday. Mind you, sometimes we do skip, but we have it every Sunday. And what that does is it allows the children to express what they think in the week. And they also let us know if our behavior throughout the week was acceptable. And we also let them know if their behavior throughout the week was acceptable. And then come following week, they'll improve on it. So we hold each other accountable by having that meeting, because even though we spend all the time together, it's different from spending quality time, because you can be in the same home with every single day, but you're not spending quality time. So that meeting, it does that, you know, so each children have their say. If mommy behavior wasn't thing, mommy, you shout this week, or mommy, your behavior was good or bad or whatever. And we do the same to them.
And if I could just add that what the meetings reminds everybody is of what their component is supposed to do, what it's capable of. For example, I always bring everything back to maths. For example, say, let's use my son, Miles. Let's use Miles as an example now. Now, Miles may think that it's okay for him to do this or do that. And I have to remind him in the meeting that his role is possibly just to add and subtract, not to square. To square root an issue or something is my job. That is my job, not his job. So he has to be reminded what his component is capable of. You spoke about some of those leaders. Many of those leaders to be a leader, you need followers. You need people to follow you, right? But many of the followers, we do not even know the capabilities of our leaders. We don't know of what they're capable of from what they're not capable of. And so it's very difficult. We don't know their limitations. We don't know what they can do from what they can't do. There's no transparency. Me as a father to my children, they know that I'm going to use maths, that my job is to square root a problem or square root them. That's not Miles's job. Miles's job in this formula is simply to add or to subtract. Don't start going around and squaring things, and because that's my job. And when you have components within a formula doing something that they're not supposed to do, that is where problems start. And so by having these family meetings, we're able to remind each other what we're supposed to do. And we remind each other in a way that is in a way that is love, because we're all we want the best for the family. So when we're bringing something to your attention, it's really about how it benefits the family. That is the aim here. So that's why we do what we do. Because even though I'm the king here, there still has to be some balances and checks on what I do. And we feel that our leaders, they don't have to be accountable. They do things and nobody says anything or nothing happens, and we just no. Who wants a leader like that? I don't.
Thank you so very much. Thank you. It has been a wonderful session with you, and you even added extra time. And yes, our prominent guest and exclusive guest, Professor James Small, is comfortably arrived and seated, and we'll be looking forward to move to the next session of lectures on the timeline of the Africa liberation. Where did it start? Where are we now? How do we carry it forward? So it's been a very wonderful pleasure for you to come here, lecture us on the formula. One thing that we learn, and the Hotep family is just learning, is like, you're in a family, you have to have a formula. Are you adding? Are you subtracting? Are you dividing? Or are you multiplying? I think that's just the basics that we have learned here today. And while we'll keep in touch with you to continue on these lectures, and where we're going to put the structures to get this message across. So one last word before we leave you, or before you leave us.
You want to say something? No? As I said, Q summed it up. Numbers, it is like numbers and full stops. I like full stops. Mathematics is a language. It is a universal language. It is the language of the universe. We have to remember that wherever you go in the world, maths is there. 2 and 2 is known everywhere in the world, wherever you go. And so my point being is, there's no point in running away from mathematics, because at some point it will catch you up.
I just want to say thank you so much. We appreciate you.
Oh, yes.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you also so much. And check out who are the certified winner of the African Liberation Week this week. We're giving out certification aid actually to our outstanding participants during this week. So check it out on our channel on Wednesday. On Monday, we're going to be announcing who our outstanding guest for this African Liberation Week had been, and who knows?
Who knows?
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
It's an honor to have you. Bye-bye. Good night.
Bye.
Thank you. Next time. Good. So we are ready to roll the power show, and Professor James Small is here, and I hope he is ready to carry on the next lectures. And remember, this is the conclusion of the African Liberation Week. What does it mean? Conclusion, we're liberated. So it is just taking, like I said, moving back and then leaping into the future. So to end this Liberation Week, while we open up the Namibia, Rwanda, we coming up with the situation or the controversial question that Africans are asking today is, Is this a new decade for the new scramble of Africa, where African leaders now are sitting on the table? What is going on around? We just heard President Macron apologizes for the Rwanda genocide and went even to the location of this grave and laid down a wreath. Now, coincidentally, or is it not a coincidence? How come in this same week we're getting Germany compensating Namibia for the genocide? I mean, these are all open questions that we want to learn from the past. What happened now? Are they coming in another kind of formula? What should Africans know? What do the youth think about this? So Professor James is, after rounding up his conversation and his lectures with us, we'll just open up the next week conversation on Namibia and Rwanda week. You know, we want to know about all this. How is it suddenly, and how would it affect us? Have our leaders learned? Now they're sitting at the table of the scramble for Africa again. Would they do the right thing? We from the Pan-African Daily TV are confident that the leadership that we have now, particularly the young people, that Africa would deliver on a win-win basis. Welcome to the show, Professor James. And thank you for joining us to conclude this week, which has been intensive, which has been educative and informative. But of course, there's been a lot of catching up. Today, you're coming to conclude this week, meaning you're starting to open a new chapter for the African in the liberation process. But before you want us to jump out being happy as if we're liberated, you want to give us a timeline, and we are here to listen and everything that you have to teach us. Welcome, Prof.
Thank you, ma'am, Dr. Susan. And thank you to the audience. That was a beautiful family, and its mathematical formula is right on African point. We invented mathematics. Mathematics is the rule of how the universe works as we discern it. So he's right on point. Families is the foundation of civilization, and not the individual. The family is the foundation of civilization. And not just any family, but is the way the African once structured its family, and still do for the most part. And that around things communal, collective, and cooperative, where all elements of the family is involved in the decision-making process for the community. So that was a very important session, and we have to do more of that. And it's not easy, because we're still living in a world where the culture of the enemy is dominating our socialization process on a daily basis. And socialization is how you get your values, how you get your interests, and how you get your principles. If the enemy's culture is controlling how you get values, interests, and principles, you're in trouble. You know, it appears to be very successful to them, but it's only successful to them because you're paying with your life and your natural resources to allow them that success. So some people say, well, we can do like the Europeans and build our beautiful nations. Yes, if you're going to enslave the Africans for 400 years, colonize them for 138 years, murder millions and tens of millions of his people, steal trillions of dollars of his resources, you can do what the European has done in that short time. Now, do you want to do that? Who are you going to enslave for 500 years? Who are you going to colonize for 140 years? Whose land are you going to rob? Whose culture are you willing to destroy? Whose spiritual system are you willing to wipe out? So be careful when you pick a model to pattern your political thrust forward, because that model required your death. And if you use that model, you will also require your death. And you will never have success. And that was simple, right? Now,
It sounds simple.
We know that Germany has compensated, and we hope they have, the people of Namibia $1.1 billion for the genocide of their people during the German occupation, which began right after the Berlin Conference. And the people of Namibia had to fight to even get them to acknowledge that this genocide had taken place. You know, we know Belgium under Leopold was responsible for the genocide of over 15 to 20 million Congolese people. And we don't even have discussion on that. No disrespect to them for losing their people, but the 6 million Jews lost in Nazi Germany is discussed somewhere in the world every day. Matter of fact, you dare not discuss it when we talk about Germany. But when we talk about the Congo, Leopold can wipe out 50 million Africans, and it's not a discussion anywhere. As the Germans wiped out more than 1 million in Namibia, and thanks to SWAPO and his victory over the colonizers, we're able to see a reward on that. But that don't mean the nation state who gave the 1.1 billion have changed their mind. I think China being in the equation now has led Europe understand that without the resources of Africa, you can't go anywhere. And if another nation is giving Africa better trade agreements, more institutional building for its natural resources, that's going to leave Europe and America beside the road needing. So China is playing a big role in this, not deliberately. I don't think China cares one bit about whether Africa survives or not. But the fact that China knows it has to be more equitable if it's going to compete with Europe and America, it has pushed ahead of Europe and America in terms of influence and access to the natural resources of Africa. That still leaves us in trouble, because when is Africa going to get access to the resources of Africa? When is Africa going to be able to use the resources of Africa to build the infrastructure of Africa, to build the schools, the hospitals, the health clinics, the roads, the dam, the power grids that we need to run today's society? When are we going to put 3 or 4 of our satellites up into space so that we're able to communicate without being cut off by the Europeans, the Americans, or the Chinese? You know. So the question forward: whose resources? African resources. Whose resources? African resources. Let's act like what's coming out of the ground in Africa is Africa's resources, and let's get better contracts and better deals, whether it's the Chinese or the Europeans we're dealing with, for the sake of Africa. We also know that the French president went to Rwanda and apologized for their role in a genocide, which took them all these years to even admit their presence in the country when the genocide was going on. But many of us knew about the French military presence and the radio station they ran directing much of the genocide, and how the rest of the Western world stayed silent until France was able to get its troops out through Burundi before they even spoke about the genocide. So that is a big step, but it isn't worth anything except for history's sake that the criminal has confessed to his criminal behavior. But I doubt if France has changed its stripes until they take all of the money deposited in French banks and deposit from the so-called Francophone state and deposit those money into an African central bank so that our wealth is not what's holding them up. Most people don't understand. All of those beautiful artwork in the museums. If you took all of the African art of the museum in Berlin and London and Paris and Antwerp and Holland, they would only need one museum in Europe for what they have. It is the African art that makes up their entire museum structure, worth trillions of dollars because they use as collateral. So even our art is a part of the wealth that's keeping the European capital going. They're using our art as collateral for loans. That's why they can't give it back. You're talking about more than $1 to $2 trillion, if not more. So let's be very clear. No one is being nice to us. They're doing what they're doing out of economic necessity for them. We must be very clear about that. But it needed to be done. Now the world at least has a peek at the role of French in the genocide of Rwanda. And I praise the government of Rwanda because I know how they fought even from the beginning to tell the world the French role and how France fought them in denying that role. But Rwanda did not back down. So thank God for a strong African government of African men and women governing by African principles. And let's hope others see Rwanda as a model for the rest of the continent as we reconstruct ourselves. But we are starting today's show, coming into today's show. I know my sister and the organization, the Pan-African Daily TV, have $1 million as a marker they're trying to reach. And it's important for us to know the beautiful show she just had with the family and all that you've seen this week on African Liberation Week takes money, takes time, takes planning. So please donate to Pan-African Daily TV.
Thank you.
Please subscribe to Pan-African Daily TV. Please help Pan-African Daily TV reach that $1 million mark so she doesn't have to beg her enemy to tell you your truth. That's so important that you can keep Sister Dr. Susan independent. And that way she can bring you knowledge and understanding, uninhibited, unrestricted. So donate, donate, donate. Subscribe. Tell your friends to subscribe and to donate. You in the Caribbean, in the United States, in Europe and Africa. And I know she reaches everybody because I get calls from the Caribbean. Trinidad, I get calls from Houston and Austin, Texas. I get calls from Ghana. So she's helping all of us. So let's help Dr. Susan and the Pan-African Daily TV continue to function as an information nexus for us. Information you will not find anywhere else. Personalities, teachers, how do you say, you name it, scientists, politicians that you will not see on anybody else's network, but you will see on Pan-African Daily TV. We outdo CNN any day of the week. So let's keep her independent without donations. That is so important, to keep her independence, where she does not have to depend on the enemy to tell our story. So
thank
I
you.
know you do it. And so I'm happy. The response yesterday was wonderful. Keep responding in that way so she can be independent and she can build an even more expansive network for you and for me. So let's continue. This is our last day of African Liberation Week. And as I was saying, our liberation isn't completed, but we brought it to a point. So I'm going to read you some history from an article by Benjamin Talton, Temple University. I was looking for something that would give us a spread of time, 138 years, from 1885 to now. So that hasn't been very long. That's only a few generations that we were dominated in such a way with colonialism. And so I'm going to read someone's report on that. I'll read some of my comments first. And I hope when people are listening to this show, always come to the Dr. Susan Tata show with a pen and a pencil, or turn on your recording on your telephone so that you can put the information down. So 138 years ago, something happened. It was called the Berlin Conference. Sometimes when you do your research, it's sometimes called the Berlin West Conference or the Congo Conference. The Berlin Conference of 1884, from the 15th November, 1884 to the 26th February, 1885. In 1870, organizations like the International African Society and the International Congo Society were formed by Europeans to research and to quote unquote civilize the continent of Africa. Of course, it didn't take long for researching and so-called civilization, quote unquote, to turn into claiming and conquering our countries by France, Britain, Germany, Belgium, and Portugal, who were scrambling to grab up new lands for themselves after that period we call the transatlantic slave trade. This scramble of sorts was the impetus for the mid-1880s Berlin Conference, where over a dozen European countries met to discuss the colonization of Africa. Now, most people said America wasn't involved, that America didn't have any colonies. That's not true at all. America was at that conference. America was at the Berlin Conference. They helped plan all of this. And American banks, Wall Street, and corporation invested in most of these countries' enterprises. Africa, prior to the Berlin Conference, the large majority of the continent was under local control. In other words, the indigenous African inhabitants were ruling their own people and their own land. Also at the time of the Berlin Conference in 1883-84, European colonization had focused mainly on the coast of the African continent. Africa's interior remained virtually untouched by outsiders in 1885. Ignoring ancient cultural lines and people group, the participant at the Berlin Conference spent about 3 months devising guidelines for colonizing not just the African coast where they had been for a few hundred years, but the interior of Mother Africa. The discussion at this conference, some of it was to make trade easier for everyone. The conference decided that the Congo and the Niger River would remain neutral and open to all European trade. They devised rules to amicably divide resources among Western countries. They set up international guidelines for making claims to African land. So you have people, a group of thieves, sitting down, plotting and planning as nation states how to invade and conquer and murder and rob another people. There were 13 European nations and the United States who participated in this conference. And I just want to read the names off for the record. Austria, Hungary, Belgium, Denmark, France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, the Ottoman Islamic Empire, Portugal, Russia, Spain, Sweden, Norway, the United Kingdom, and the United States. So let's be clear. So we don't think, oh, some of the colonists was good people and some was bad people, and these ones didn't do so bad. No, they all sat and plot our robbery, our murder, and plot the destruction of our institutions, and plot the destruction of our cultural system. And it's something I want to read. I posted it yesterday, but I want to read it again today because this is important to understand. If you're going to understand what we must change if we are to defeat the enemy at hand. And one of the things that we must change, that we have to change, is the culture that governs our daily life. And I know you were discussing that in the last meeting, but we need to discuss it again. And it was decided in Britain, and this was in the early 1880s. One of the Britain parliamentarians speaking before the parliament said he had been to Africa in the Nigeria area, and he had never seen a people so honest, so giving. He had never seen a people so united and strong. And he said, we will never defeat these people unless we are able to destroy their cultural and their spiritual system and replace it with ours. So that's why throughout the colonial era, you'll see the missionaries moving with the soldiers, because it was clear the only way you can defeat Africa is to destroy her culture. The only way you can defeat Africa is to destroy her spiritual system. And then our military victory would make sense. But I'm going to read to you this document because what I want you to see, we never stop fighting. We never stop resisting from the first day of the invasions to today. In the history books that the colonialists gave us, in the schools that the churches and the government set up in our nation and our continent, they never told us about our resistance and our great heroines and our great heroes. So I want to read a little bit of that history. It'll be a little boring, but don't let it be too boring because it's important to put it on record, and Susan will have it on record. So why did they choose Africa? You know, and what was Africa's resistance to colonial rule? While African resistance to European colonialism is often thought of in terms of white and black, European and African powers struggling, this presumption underestimates the complex and strategic thinking that African commonly employed to address the challenges of European colonialism and its rule. It also neglects the colonial era power dynamic of which African societies and institutions were essential components. After the Berlin Conference of 1884 and 85, at which the most powerful European countries agreed upon rules for laying claim to particular African territories, the British, the French, the German, the Italians, the Spanish, the Belgians, the Portuguese, set about formally implementing strategies for the long-term occupation and control of Africa. The conquest had begun decades earlier, and in the case of Angola and South Africa, centuries earlier. But at the Berlin Conference, it became more systematic and overt. The success of the European conquest and the nature of African resistance must be seen in light of Western Europe's long history of colonial rule, economic exploitation around the world. In fact, by 1885, Western Europe had mastered the art of dividing and conquer and rule, honing their skills over 400 years of imperialism and exploitation in the Americas, Asia, and the Pacific. In addition, the centuries of extreme, violent, protracted warfare among themselves, combined with the technology and advance of the Industrial Revolution, produce an unmatched military might. When rather late in the period of European colonial expansion, Europeans turned to Africa to satisfy their greed for resources, prestige, and empire. They quickly worked their way into Africa's society to gain allies and proxies, and to co-opt the conquered kings and chiefs, all to further their exploit. Consequently, the African response to this process, particularly the ways in which they resisted it, were complex. So it's important that we look at the complexity of the African nations that did not have the high military weapon technology of Europe, nor did the Africans have what we call the history of war culture. And that's not a light thing. The culture of war. European was a war society. It was a society that has had the 100-Year War, the War of Roses. They've been fighting wars ever since Europe came into existence. So there's a culture of war, now armed with high-tech military weapons. 400 years of experience in the Americas and Asia of using these weapons and this war technology that would meet Africa in 1885. Now, adding to the complexity was the fact that rapid European imperial expansion in Africa did not necessarily change relationship among African communities. Those in conflict with one another tend to remain in conflict, despite the impeding threat from the French, the British, Germans, and other powers. There was, however, no broadly accepted African identity to unite around during this period. The strongest identities were, was the community itself. And as a lesser extent, religion, which begins to explain the presence of African participation in European conquest of other African societies. During the second half of the 19th century, for example, in what is now Ghana, the conflict between the Fanti and the Asante, which predated Britain, was designed on the Kingdom of Asante, was what motivated the Fanti to join the British against the Asante. They didn't see the consequences. Since they had a fight with the Asantes, the British had been on the coast trading and carrying on the slave trade for nearly 400 years. And so when the British offered an alliance, they worked out an alliance with the British. And so the Asante was a part of the British effort against the Ashantis. The Fanti, was a part of that British effort against the Asantes. So at the time, it seemed to be their greatest threat. They didn't think the Brits would be a threat. They thought they would go back to their little castles and go back home. But we found out that Europe don't work like that. The complexity of African political relationship among themselves then influenced the nature of their resistance to colonial rule. As they resist European invasion, they were confronted, both Europeans and African adversaries and soldiers. So that is, they confronted a political hierarchy imposed by the Western European that included African proxies. The power was European, but the face of it on the local level was often African. Despite the seeming contradiction, it remains insufficient to speak of African response to the imposition of colonialism in one instance, and in the next to resist European authoritarianism. It was also possible to limit European political control through some forms of collaboration with European generals or colonial administrators. What we begin to see leads to the response we see when we get to Menelik II, Emperor of Ethiopia, when he began fighting the Italians who had come in through what is now Eritrea. The Eritreans didn't see the Italians as an enemy. They thought that the greater Ethiopia was their enemy, and they could work out an alliance with the Italians to fight the greater Ethiopia. But that didn't work. Thank God, Menelik was able to unify the rest of the Ethiopian nation and then led his army to accomplish this unique feat in March 1896. This is less than 10 years after the invasion began, in defeating General Oreste Battisti's, the Italian army in Eritrea, who was allies with the Eritrean at the Battle of Adwa. Like Menelik, Samori Touré, who created a large Manding empire in West Africa between the 1860s and the 1890s, was an inspiring political and military leader. But in the French, he faced a far more capable, tenacious, and experienced adversary than Menelik had in Italy. Samori's legacy remains controversial, yet he's significant, and that's because of the Islamic conquest and the jihads into indigenous communities. But he managed to hold the French at bay for so many years before he was captured and sent into exile. But we had others in the same area that was fighting. So though he did a good job in defeating the French was able to overcome them with their military technology. And don't underestimate the military technology. That's what defeated Africa, not the fantastic European armies and how much military technology they knew. They had a technology called the gun, and particularly what they call the Maxim back then, or the Gatling gun, or what we call the machine gun today. When they invented that weapon, we didn't have a chance. But we kept the battle going forward. And so we would see that as he conquered African territory, this is Samori, in engaging the conflict in Africa with his African competitors, the French pushed deeper into West Africa, into the interior, into Senegal, under the direction of Louis Field Herbie, or whatever this Frenchman's name, and his Senegalese troops, a corps of African soldiers, and the British push northwards, trying to trap Samori through Sierra Leone and the Gold Coast with a large contingent of Hausa soldiers. Each time the French attacked the territory, they would get routed. They just could not defeat this African army of Samori. But it was the gun technology that did it. And we have to take that gun technology into account for that day. It will not work today, but it worked then. What happened to us in most of these cases, we had to make these alliances to survive. we didn't think of Europeans as being another race or species. We just saw them as human beings. We didn't see them as we're Africans, they're Europeans. We saw them as human beings, we are as human beings. We have an enemy that we've been fighting with, and they are going to ally with us because they see that as their enemy also. And we thought we would so be left without freedom. We didn't know a Berlin conference had taken place. We didn't know there was a plan to invade every corner of Africa. We didn't know that this conspiracy involved the entire European world at the time. And so we watched the attacks come with the British and the French and the West. We watched the Germans come into Namibia and Tanzania. We watched the French in Senegal, Mali, what is now Mali, Senegal, Niger, Burkina Faso, Cote d'Ivoire. We watched the Dutch come into South Africa and then the British come into South Africa. We watched the Portuguese coming into East Africa and Mozambique, and in West Africa to Angola, or Southwest Africa to Angola. These were all military invasions, and rightfully in history, this should be called the First World War, because every European nation, after sitting down and plotting in Berlin, launched a military attack on Africa. Now remember, the Europeans was in Africa for nearly 400 years, but only on the coast. And they had made certain alliances and arrangements for trade and other things with our people. And so they were not new to us. We actually probably thought they were our friends. But now they had used the slave trade and they'd used the wealth of the Americas to trigger and initiate the Industrial Revolution. And they needed the natural resources that only Africa could provide to fuel that Industrial Revolution. And there's a man in history called Morton Stanley, who we hear about in our books they give us in school, that the man that went to Africa to find Dr. Livingstone and to save his life. And when he found Livingstone, he said, Dr. Livingstone, I presume. And we've all been taught in school to say, Dr. Livingstone, I presume. But no one told you that Stanley begun the process of genocide that would lead to the Berlin Conference, that would lead to Leopold taking over the Congo, because Leopold hired him and he killed hundreds of Africans in his march from the east coast of the Congo to the Atlantic Ocean. But what he and many others did was to find out what was there, what was the natural resources. And one of the big things in Europe at that time was copper. They needed copper. And they found that Africa had this abundance of copper. And they were all fighting for the copper. They were already looking for the gold. And then they learned about the manganese. And then they learned about the other natural resources in the ground that they could use to build their new Europe, to fuel and feed the Industrial Revolution. But the key thing to note, throughout this entire period of time, Africans resisted. Not one day since 1885 did we not resist the Europeans coming into our land. So let me just read a little piece about the cultural and religious resistance. Not all resistance during the early years of European colonial rule took the form of pragmatic violence. Most was more subtle and direct towards local issues of political, economic, and economic autonomy. Politically, or particularly in the British territories, Africans commonly used local movements to resist European colonial policies or practices by the colonial administration and its African proxies. In 1929, the Aba Women's Revolt, I think this is among the Igbo people, and this is what triggers the woman revolt in Igbo land, and then in Cameroon, and then in Nigeria. This, by the time of the First World War, these resistance by the African woman would end up triggering what became that move between World War I and World War II for liberation. One of the ways we resisted, because the Europeans had gotten into the First World War, but they didn't have enough soldiers. And most people don't know, a couple of million of us fought in that war, and hundreds of thousands of us died in that war from the continent of Africa. But for every one that they were able to get to go to that war, there was one African who resisted joining their military. And many even had to go in exile from their own countries in order to do this. The other thing the Europeans needed in order to sustain themselves in World War I, they needed the natural resources of Africa, and they needed the food products of Africa to feed their troops. But nobody talks about this in the history books, or to fuel their plants that was building their military technology. Well, almost 50% of Africans resisted both that by refusing to work or sabotaging the job, and many even led armed resistance. There wasn't a single decade that went by that we didn't have multiple armed resistance against European occupation. Not a single decade. So when we try to think of the revolutionary movement now, what we call the liberation movement, from day one, there's been a liberation movement. If we look at, we've talked about Menelik, but look at the Sudan with Muhammad Ahmed, whereas the Turks and the British coming out of Egypt tried to conquer Sudan, and they meet Muhammad Ahmed, called the Mahdi. And he was able to kill the British General Gordon and defeat the army of 23,000 Turks and Brits that came down to conquer Sudan. And after his death, by poisoning, which was probably some sort of collaborator sabotage, Abdullah came to power and began to lead the Sudan. But he was defeated by the French being able to come to his back from the west and the Brits from the north, and they were able to finally take the Sudan and get control of the Nile, because controlling the Nile River was key to conquering the interior of the continent. But in the country of what we now call Zimbabwe, we had a great lady. We had this great lady warrior who, I think it was this week that Zimbabwe built a statue to her. She was a priestess of the tradition, and she went against the Brits. I wanted to find, and maybe Susan can help me with her name. Yes. They call her a medium, but Africans didn't have mediums. We had priests and priestesses, sacred scientists. And her name is Nihanda. And she led the revolutionary resistance against the British. But again, if you ever see a picture of her, you will see her in chains just before they hung her. But you will see some of us collaborating with rifles on our shoulders, supporting the British, capturing their own people. But she led the movement among the Ndebele people and the Shona people who had come to be their allies against the British and against Cecil Rhodes, who had invaded their land. And so when you understand, when we think of Rhodesia, they came in under the guise of, we want to pay you for your natural resources. So the people of Zimbabwe says, okay, good deal, because we weren't using that way. So we don't let them have this. We're raising our cattle, we have our agrarian society. But when the double cross came and Cecil Rhodes says, oh no, I paid you for your whole land. And even the king of the Ndebele people in some chronicles in history talk about the raping of our women, the sacking of our villages. And even then, they immediately went to armed resistance against Cecil Rhodes and the British, who because of...
Oh, are you talking about...
Yes, but this is after Nihenda's death. Okay, well, her death comes in the midst of this resistance, right? That's going on against the British and Cecil Rhodes. And so the point I want to make is that we have resisted militarily from the very beginning. We resisted spiritually from the beginning. And almost every one of our military resistance was led by African spiritual and cultural leaders. Okay? Because they were defending the integrity of the African communal social order, which is now being violated by a foreign idea of how society should run and the way people should be used and treated. And so the liberation movement that we will see in Zimbabwe under Mugabe, ZANU-PF, and ZANU-PF and ZANU-PO, but those two major movements that collaborate to defeat Ian Smith and the Rhodesians really begun with this priestess, with this lady, and it never stopped. It was always sporadic, and it just bloomed and grew into what we knew as the modern liberation movement. In the meantime, we had Malawi, and it was a Malawi Baptist preacher who had been trained in America and brought back to Malawi to lead his people. But when he saw the atrocities being committed against the people of Malawi, he led the first armed resistance at the turn of the 20th century. You know, if we go to Kenya, even before the Mau Mau uprising, you find, I think it's the Garima people, led a massive resistance against the British. And then we would have the great Mau Mau movement under Jomo Kenyatta and Kimanti, Didan Kimanti, and others that broke the back of modern colonialism in East Africa. So when we understand that, yes, the Berlin Conference existed, yes, they invaded Africa, yes, that should have been called the First World War. Yes, they got control because of their military technology. No, we didn't accept it. Yes, we resisted from the very beginning. Yes, we resisted economically, politically, militarily, spiritually, up till this day. That's the importance of the discussion. So African liberation isn't a day, it's a process that's gone on for centuries. And what has made it difficult is Africa was not a war culture. It was not a culture of conquests. It was a culture of communal, collective, cooperative relationships that did have their conflicts, but they had conflict resolution systems to resolve their conflicts. We didn't have prisons. We worked out a contradiction where someone would give their labor to pay for their crime, but not as a slave, as in chattel slavery, because once you've paid your indenture or your debt or your crime, you can even become the chief of that village or the king of that empire. You can marry into any of the families once you have satisfied your contradiction against the social order. You'll find no other country in the world where prisons did not exist except in Africa, because we had a way of humanly working out the contradictions at the most local levels. And that spread to the empire level. If Africa is going to defeat Europe and Asia, and yes, we have to defeat them, make no bones about them, it's not going to be militarily. We couldn't defeat them militarily then, we certainly can't defeat them militarily now. We will defeat them culturally and spiritually. That will guide our politics. That will guide our economic practices. We now talk about corruption. Yes, the corruption came from the European, but not as a one-to-one. It is a system of corruption. And we've adopted that system as our way of governance. So if you accept the system of corruption as your way of governance, you are going to be corrupt, because that's what the system does. So we need to turn to another system. And as you study African history and you do the research and the reading, I realize these people never gave up. We were never defeated, ever. We never gave up. Yes, they invaded our land. Yes, they occupied us, and now they economically occupy us. And in the French area, they're still militarily occupying us. In some areas, Britain still have troops and they're militarily occupying us. And the Americans have based all over Africa, they're militarily occupying us. But they've never defeated us. That's what I want our people to take away from today. They never defeated us. We never stopped resisting. We resisted in ways that you can't imagine. You know, we use sabotage. We use military exercise. We use poisoning. We use every means necessary every single day since the Berlin Conference. Somewhere in Africa, we were resisting in multiple places at a time. And those older year resistance became our modern Frelimo, SWAPO, PIGC, and the other liberation movements we saw that brought us out of the 60s into these free nation states that was free from the European military dominance, but not free from their economic dominance. And the colonialism we're fighting today is an economic colonialism, a cultural colonialism, and a spiritual colonialism. And the only way we will throw this off, we must return to African culture, African spirituality, and we will know how to best use our economic arrangements. We went to Ghana, who discovered all this oil on the road to Cote d'Ivoire less than 20 years ago. And they brought the Europeans in. And Ghana is getting 10 to 15% of its own oil revenue. If you go to Chad, they're getting 15% of their own oil revenue. All the rest is going to the West. That kind of arrangement, what are they getting for the gold? All of the gold negotiations is done in secret in Gold House in Ghana. What percentage of the gold is coming back to build the infrastructure of the people of Ghana? We saw our brother in Tanzania show us how to do it before he died. He says, I'm cutting off everything. You're not taking any gold out of my country until we renegotiate the contract. And then you're going to pay me for all those back years when you were stealing my gold and wasn't paying me what was appropriate. And we saw what he was able to do with that revenue and building the infrastructure of Tanzania in a few years. We saw Mugabe, even though he was vilified in the Western press and some of our press falsely vilified him, when he closed the diamond mines and closed the gold mines and said that people of Zimbabwe will run their diamond mine, they will run their gold mines. You will not set the price of our worth. We will set the price and then sell it to you. So we have to study our history. When we saw Sierra Leone, when they started this term about blood diamonds, people don't even understand the concept. They're saying if an African sell diamonds, that's blood diamonds. Only if you certify your diamonds to the white people of Europe would your diamond be considered legitimate in the marketplace. So you can't sell your own natural resources. It's a crime internationally. What is that? And when the people resisted, they vilified them. I forgot the name of the man. He was a villain when he started out in Sierra Leone. But by the time they arrested him and he died of a stroke in prison, he had gotten with Charles Taylor and others, Francois Massaquoi of Liberia, and they had made a decision, we're going to control the diamond fields in Liberia and in Sierra Leone. Whoa, the Western press went crazy to make them the most villainous people in Africa because they wanted to control the diamonds of Africa. And that's where the term blood diamonds arose. Study that history. Don't accept their side of the story. I knew Francois Massaquoi. It was so small, knew everybody. It's like, no, when you get old, you know a lot of people. You know, Francois Massaquoi was the Minister of Youth in Liberia. And his helicopter was shot down just before the war was declared on Charles Taylor. You know, Charles Taylor is languishing in a prison he shouldn't be in. Even though there's some Liberians who may differ with me, they need to really study the history and not listen to the white man's side of this story. The people of Sierra Leone, with all that diamond, why are you in poverty? Because somebody's stealing your diamond. And even if you found one in your garden and tried to sell it, they put you in jail and said that's blood diamonds. And we accept that proposition? No.
Wow.
So the point is, we have never stopped fighting from the Berlin Conference to now. And we've used every method possible to resist that any people could use to resist. But we were invaded by every European nation of note for that day with the highest military technologies in the world. This is not them fighting each other in Europe. This is those who would fight each other later in the First World War, all teaming up to fight us at one time. So imagine all of that military power you saw in the First World War being leashed upon Africa in 1885. With all of their new gun technology, bomb technology, airplane, explosive technology, leased upon us. But they never were able to conquer us. They were able to subdue us to some degree. And now take control over the last 30, 40 years, our economic resources. But they never defeated Africa. And so today when you see the president of France go to Rwanda, because they know they can never defeat us militarily. They didn't do it before. They neutralized us because of their weapon technology, but they never defeated us. And it's only been 138 years. Most of Africa was free 138 years ago, being run by Africans. So it's been less really than 100 years that most of our nations were conquered by these Europeans. And by the 1950s and early 60s, we had taken all of our land back. But unfortunately, we took his governance system and his economic system for the way forward. And that became the imperial yoke around our necks today. So I hope I've done some credit to the subject. That
Wonderful.
You can go even into Zululand and look at the battles that the Zulu nation put up. You know, look at a Secheweya, look at a Bambata, go to the Shona people, go to the Ndebele people, go to the people of Zambia, go to the Congo. There's nowhere you'll go when we weren't in resistance, either armed resistance or some other form of social disobedience that disrupted the colonial capital flow. But we resisted till this day. And so African Liberation Day should be a celebration. We should not call it African Day. Call it African Liberation Day as we did in the beginning. It should be a celebration of a people's resistance against the mightiest armies in the world for over 100 years with minimal gun technology. One of the few Africans who was able to build his own guns was Samori in West Africa. And he was able to keep the French at bay for so long because he was able to build his own guns. There were other communities in Zimbabwe where we built our own guns. And I think in Ethiopia, we were able to build our own guns by capturing theirs and duplicating the technologies. Because guns wasn't a part of our culture until they came. So our resistance, our rebellion to our death. We have so many heroes and so many heroines. For every country in Africa, I guarantee you, over that 100-year period, you have at least 50 men or women you can call heroes and heroines that you should hold up as a model for today. As they've done in Zimbabwe with Nahanda, and as they've done in other places with great leaders. And our power have extended even to Europe. I think I mentioned yesterday that it was a battle, and then I'll end with this. It was in South Africa, and the British had a large contingent of troops in Zululand. And there was a conflict between one young chief of the Zulus and a couple of his wives. So they ran away to the British military camp. And he went to the camp and he asked for the return of his wives. Of course, the British said no. So he proceeded and wiped out the British military camp. I think he killed 200 of them. And he takes his wives as is appropriate. So the word goes to the British big generals, and they sent down 2,000 or 3,000 British soldiers. So they come to the big king, Sechiweya, and said, we want you to turn that chief over to us. And Sechiweya said, my culture won't allow for that. And so they proceeded at a battle called Islambada to attack King Sechiweya, who wiped out 2,000 of their troops, I think, in a couple of days, and caused the collapse of the British government of Robespierre, because the Brits went crazy that Robespierre would dare allow for these Black people to destroy a British army in South Africa. But they don't put that in your history book, do they? You know? And we don't know Sechiweya's name. We don't have his picture up on our walls. You know? So we need to study our history. It'll erase the enemy's mystery. We need to know that our people never surrendered Africa to anybody ever. We never surrendered Africa. Even the Moors and the mixed group led the liberation movement in Algeria against France, led the liberation movement in Morocco. They led the movement in Egypt. We never surrendered Africa, ever. And not a week went by when there wasn't multiple resistant movement against the colonial tyranny to this very day. That is a legacy we need to study. It is too much. I thought I could put all that I had to read, look, in 1 hour. You couldn't possibly do that. So
no.
So it's just too much, but you must study and know the legacy of your ancestors and how extraordinary we are. And the fact that they never gave up. They never stopped resisting. They never accepted colonialism. They never accepted the transatlantic slave trade. We fought them tooth and nails in that slave trade. So for those who are on this side, who say, oh, you sold me. Yes, some chiefs got involved in that, but they didn't know what chattel slavery was. They were taking their prisoners of war and from a squabble with another group of brothers and selling them as they would do at home, and those people would be back home in no time. They did not know about the genocide. That was the transatlantic slave trade. We didn't own any slave ships. We had no colonies in America. We didn't know this thing. But for every one chief that might have been involved in the slave trade, there were 10 to 20 who fought against it. Let's learn their stories. They were our uncles too. They were our aunties too. Let's learn their stories. And that story, if someone, you young people, would tell that story of the resistance against the transatlantic slave trade, of the resistance that followed the Berlin Conference, it would be the greatest story ever told in the world. No African child will ever lower their heads in the presence of any other ethnic group or race if they know this story.
You know? Actually. Ooh. What a time. What a professor. What a lecture, Professor James Small.
We are the greatest people on earth because we have been the most human people on earth. We've opened ourselves with hospitality to everyone, even though we've been betrayed, offering that hospitality. We have resisted tyranny from the beginning. We thought these new nation state systems that we employed after colonialism would be useful governing tools, but we see they're not. There's some things in them that are useful and good to use, But unless it's integrated with the African communal, collective, cooperative concept of structuring family and governance, they'll never work in the interest of our group. They'll only work for the few. You know?
Absolutely.
It is for the young people to make the decision on which way forward, but you can't go forward if you don't look back. If you go forward thinking you were a slave, you African Americans, my brothers and sisters, Black Americans, if you think you're a slave, then you will never, ever be free. Because our people never submitted to slavery, not in the Americas. We resisted every day, every year. Somewhere, somebody was leading a rebellion. Because we're not a new people, we're just the same African people displaced. It is the African spirit, it's the African idea of how human beings should treat human beings that allow a man and a woman to resist tyranny. You know? So if you learn your story, you will never bow your head. You will never bow your head, ever, to anyone except your ancestors. To them, we bow our head. To no one else do we bow our head.
Wow. This is big. Thank you so much. Wow, 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 wow. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I don't know how I'm thanking you on the behalf of the Pan-African Daily TV and everything you've just said and these lectures. It's been recorded a lot. I saw people that were saying, oh, I'm just turning up to record. We also have it here in the data bank and on the continent and stuff. So for any archives or reference or anybody that would like, or even those that are doing their research work in cultural anthropology or African studies and history, these are masterpieces you can use for your thesis or for your research work. And I don't know how to thank you again, Prof. I don't really just know. It's yeah.
I know, Sister Susan, we've got to, and you've got to remind me too, we've got to step up our putting together of that bibliography in the library you're trying to do.
Yes.
So that people can just call you and get some of this bibliography, get some of the text, get some of the research, know how to go to Oxford and look at the British colonial files, know how to go to Antwerp and look at their colonial files. They don't throw away their files, you know.
Yes.
Because it's about economics, and they keep all of the economic records and the historical relationship to us. So the research can be done. And you can see our people, have proven to be the greatest people in the world. We think of Yaa Asantewaa in Ghana, who takes on the British Empire on behalf of the Ashantis. We think of our sister Queen Nzinga in Congo. You know, how can you dismiss these models of the greatest, glorious, most powerful people in the world? We think of our sister Anna, what's her name? Amanatu, up in what is now parts of Chad and Nigeria, the old Borneo Empire, where she takes on the Ottoman Empire. Even though she was Muslim and they were Muslim, they were still coming and stealing and raiding our land and taking our people. And she militarily takes them on. When the Abbas invaded North Africa with their Muslim movement from the east under their Turkish subject and Mamluk slaves, it was a Black woman that led the army out of the Atlas Mountains against them. We need to know this history, people. We never gave up. We never stopped fighting. You can go as far as during the Islamic Empire, before Western colonialism, study the rebellion of the Zanj, the Black people that the Arabs and Greeks enslaved into the Persian Gulf saltpeter mine, and one of the greatest rebellion in the history of the world, even before Haiti was led against them. It's called the Rebellion of the Zanj, Z-N-J-I. That was the Arabic word for Black people. And we overthrew their little empire. We crushed their empire. And there's a book by Jahiz an African man. He wrote 9 books, and one of them was called The Superiority of the Blacks Over the White. This is the 8th century. We never stopped fighting back. But if you don't study your history, caught up in their mystery, you won't know your strength and your power or your ancestors or your culture or your spirit. And if you don't know that, then you will be their slaves. You know. But I would not feel remiss about the crisis in Cameroon, because we're going to solve that crisis, even if time alone removes those who are in our way. We know how the British came in and invaded from one direction. We know the French invaded from the other direction. They had their maximum guns, the machine guns. Our spears couldn't go up against that. So we had to yield. And we are suffering from that till today. That man who's the president, he's nobody. He's nobody. He's not the people. He's there because of the circumstances of the invaders. But he'll go soon. He's almost gone now. He'll go soon. But we must be prepared to put an African state in place that tried to continue the same sick, corrupt European city-state model that doesn't even work for them. African liberation, what does freedom mean? To liberate your mind, free, liberate, dome, mind. So until you liberate your mind, you're not going to liberate your behind. So you first must have freedom, liberate your mind. And the only way you can do that is know your history and respect your ancestry and learn their system of how to be human. And you can defeat anybody in the world because we know them now. In 1885, we did not know them. We mistook them to be like us. We won't make that mistake again. We know them now. I hope I made sense, Susan. I was saying a lot of different things.
No, you made so much good sense, so much good sense. And I know that one of the other things was working on your documentary series, and we're putting that also together to make that happen. And all this research and this library that you're talking about, the young people now at our work, like you said, in the past we were not, we were even distracted too much to thinking that we have to go to school, come and earn a living and earn a salary and later retire. Now the African is creative, innovative thinking and setting up and try to redesign a model that will work for itself and its people. And I think most Africans would enjoy the luxury of time, and because time is one of those factors that was being stolen from us, that took even our brains and they put it into working machines, and we were just functional.
Use the term world view. We had a world view when they came, and we had our worldview taken away and replaced with their worldview. We have to come back and look at our historical information so we can again recreate our worldview.
Worldview. Yep. Noted. Yep. Noted. Good. Wow, Prof. Thank you. Thank you. What is the last thing that you want us to know? I just heard a comment from Doron Emblem saying history is our weapon.
Absolutely.
And you just, yes.
History. Remember, history, when we look at our own history with our own eyes, history is your document from your ancestry to tell you what to do next.
Correct.
You see? And when you have that clear, you know who your friends are, you know who your enemies are, you know what to do next. This isn't about hating anybody. I don't hate anybody. I just love Africa enough to do anything for her.
Correct.
I love African people enough to do anything for them. So you don't have to hate anybody. You just have to love you.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much, Prof. Thank you, all our viewers. We've made it. We've made the power show. And this is the end of the African Liberation Week. We wish you all, I don't know, a pleasant holiday, 2 days, just 2 days, tomorrow and Monday. And we'll be back on Tuesday, starting with the Namibia, Rwanda week. And we want to focus on the youth on the continent and in the diaspora. If you're interested to be part of the conversation for next week, we want to think and reflect together, just like we've been listening to all these great lectures. We are liberating and going back. But now, what is the way forward? Now, what should the youth be thinking about the situation that is currently going on now? Should they just remain quiet, ignore it, be silent, or just talk behind? Or it is time to act? That is the motto for next week's topic. So I want to thank you so much, Prof. And
thank
yes,
you, my dear. Peace and blessings.
Peace and good night to you. Hotep. Good night. Thank you. Wonderful. And good night also to you. Good night to you. All of us have won. All of us have learned. All of us are empowered. All of us are engaged. All of us packed up. All of us. What is it that we don't know? Now we have the formulas. We have the ratio. We know that everything is mathematics, science, and yeah. I want to thank this wonderful family out here. We did 4-5 hours today, but the preparation even took more than 10 hours. I want to thank the technical crew. Yeah, Ia was sitting here for the past 5 hours, and Ia is just 17 with us. Yeah, so thank you so much, Ia, for switching the slides. And we had a new format where we could do the small screen, and so we could explore our guests actually in the lobby room or in the studio. Yeah, so that's also an invention that Ia just discovered, from the stream that we're using or from our studio. Thank you so very much. I want to also thank Naisha. Naisha, you did so well by curating the guest for this week. There were some challenges, yeah, but I mean, we are learning every day to grow even bigger. I want to thank Patrick Kasserim out there, for collaborating and cross-posting on the social media network platforms that we're having or that we're corresponding with. I also want to thank the guests with every power and energy that is sat here, to give us the reason why we should liberate, be it economically, historical, spiritually, culturally, everything that we needed. I think it's not enough just to do it on this week, but this is a production, as you all know, and we're saving all this data, and we can reproduce and reproduce and reproduce endlessly. So we want to thank all of you, the chatters, the commenters, the viewers, the followers, the contributors. How much more can we thank ourselves for this? And the recommendations. I've been seeing people say, oh, Susan, why don't you take adverts like the others are doing, and so that we can fund the channel grow faster? Others are saying, oh, please do a Cash App. And because the super chat is just taking 30% off. I do agree. I do see from the beginning we did a Cash App and Cash App, and because of their community standards on always bringing down our channels and stuff like that, we kind of just get tired of this. But of course, we renew it, and on Tuesday we're going to get a Cash App for all of you that could simply just want to share their contribution. And also, we'll be looking also into that possibility of advertising. Actually, we know, and we've been having all these offers, but for us, our interest was just get it. It was not about that. But now we also learning that to liberate ourselves, we also have to be economically liberated, culturally. What did he say? Economic, cultural, and spiritual liberation is what we need, because the colonial form was the military and the political system of governance. But now we have to win the war through economic, spiritual, and cultural. These are the three key components and the words and the takeaways that we have to know. So we need to know how we fund our own selves from our own self, that we don't depend on, foreign funders. Otherwise, we will not even be able to share these stories the way we are. Imagine we are sponsored or supported or funded, by the same systems that we actually want to redress and correct all these challenges. And imagine we will be sitting here and talking. No way, no way. So we are able, we are capable, and we are doing it. I want to thank you so much. so much. Without you, we wouldn't be doing the productions, isn't it? And so we know that YouTube is putting a lot of adverts on it, making it also difficult for us to just sit down. But what we're going to be doing, we have produced a lot with your collaboration and your participation, more than 700 to 800 conversations with all these top guests. The next step on the Pan-African Daily TV would be to do a small production of all the series, right? And so portable conversation, keywords, cut them, rebrand them, and share them easily. So we need your support. Technically, if you are that kind of a producer that you say, I'm so versed in doing this, these are the volunteers that we're looking at to be a part of the conversation. Another thing, we're building this Pan-African University that we call the GPAD in collaboration with all our affiliate professors that you've been seeing here, right? So whether it's going to be in a mathematician, now we just had one today, pay ratio. He's going to be teaching our children. Like we say, we're saying the same thing. We have to teach our own self. We cannot entrust our children, our generation, and even ourselves, you know, to the same systems that educate us to give us the freedom or the liberation. So we are putting out GPAD. GPAD just means Global Institute for Pan-African Studies. Yeah. And we have mentors like Dr. Nichols that is working on the concept, Professor James Small, Dr. Jeffries, all Dr. Wade Nobbers, all of them, Professor Baina, all what you've been seeing here is a story that is going to start to liberate. And now, because of this, we know our people on the continent, every African will have access. It is a mobile online university where we do exactly what we're doing now. Now, the Pan-African Daily is the voice, you know, to bring out the short messages, but the real courses and classes, be it in economic, ancient history, culture, our food, our lifestyle, our products, and everything. Yeah, just doing it in our culture. And what we're going to do with GPA is going to be available on the globe. Yes, it's going to be available on the globe, so you can be a partner in your own. But it's a one-source university where everybody connect with the professors, they book the courses, and it's going to be certified. Yeah, so it's a certificate, and you earn a degree in Pan-Africanism and the way forward. And it's not only going to that, but also to create the jobs after. It's an economic liberation. So we need your support, not just financially, technically, morally. Bring the skills and let us build the Africa that we want. That's what we need. We need a lot of mentors. We need a lot of counselors. We need a lot of trainees. We need a lot of people to put the vocational trainings. We also need corporate partners, companies that are African oriented, that could give the possibility for a career. So when they get the lectures from GPA and they are having a training session in a company, be it on the continent or in the diaspora, all the structures, it is easy. It is a one-stop shop. We're not going to create the moon. It's not rocket science. It's just a platform that is digitally going online. And our professors are here sacrificing and doing it voluntarily. Most of them, we're going to get a library, because the library, like Professor James said, is so important. All these historical books that we're having here, where do we find them? We find them on Amazon. We find them on this. To purchase them, you need to get an account. To purchase them, you need to have them. They are all our books from our scholars and researchers that have been doing the work, putting the time there. So we need this library. So GPA is going to get a library. It's going to get a career center. It's going to get the seminars. It's going to get the vocational. It's going to get the skills. It's going to get the corporate finance. I mean, all what you can imagine, just in a one-stop shop. And we're going to keep it so easy and simple. We're going to do it just like we're doing it here. So we're not going to create a village or create a magic structure that would need investment. No, what we just need is the skills. What skills have you been learning out here? It doesn't mean, like I know Germany has the biggest skill set. If a German trains you how to clean, there would be no cleaner like you. Now, all our immigrants or African immigrants are here. All of us pass through cleaning. Cleaning, they call it putzen. That's the first thing that puts you a pay job in Germany when you come like a migrant or a migrant or a refugee. You have to learn to clean. But this cleaning goes up to a vocational training of 3-year skills, where you do the theory and you do the practical. So these vocational training models is what we see as the re-engineering for our young people. How to bake bread. Today, I just learned in Zambia, bread, where we produce flour, where we produce just simple things to bake and sell, is costing more than a 50 cent for a loaf of bread. How come? We have to teach our people how to bake bread daily. Our parents did it every day and they could sell from home. So there's a lot that we are going to realize in the coming sessions. But right now, what we're doing is re-educating and connecting ourselves and setting the structures. So I want to thank you for being a part of this wonderful dream. And now you see that African liberation is just a step. And it's not going to be a military. No. Let us leave the presidents to negotiate what they are negotiating with this kind of partnership. Let us build structures to educate and empower our people and give them the means to be able to redesign all what we've been talking about. It's time to put it into a practical session. So I want to thank you for being, again, part of this journey. Bring your skills on the table. Contact us, contact Naisha. What is it that you can do? How can you mentor? What skills do you have? Now we keep saying, take the skills on the continent. No, you can provide the skills now at JIPA where you are just sitting. Yeah, you teach anything like our brother Ratio. Just sit in your comfort zone. We turn on the camera and you're lecturing to thousands of children on the continent. Yes, we're going to. And we see ourselves, and like I said, check it out on Monday. Who are the ones that we're giving a certification of Pan-Africanism that have been so outstanding on the African Liberation Week? Yeah, all our guests, all our viewers, everybody. But there are some particularities and some people that we've decided to award them, okay? And it's also about the Dr. Susan Tata Award for Pan-Africanism, yes, but the certification of participation as a guest and contributor. Every one of us have it, but there's some special people that we want to actually give it to them. So check out on our YouTube channel. On Monday, we're going to announce that and show the certifications and be a part of that ceremony. And we see us again on Tuesday, starting the Namibia-Rwanda week. God bless you. All of us, we stay in touch and keep in touch. Bye-bye. You are watching the Pan-African Daily TV with Dr. Susan Tata. The Africa we want. Unity, consciousness, our culture, our spirituality, our history. One Africa for Africans worldwide. Motherland's calling its diaspora home. Join my voice. Join my team. Join my campaign. Campaign 21 hashtag 1 million subscribers on the Pan-African Daily TV YouTube. Be a volunteer. Apply now. Be the new Africa.